Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 300 for Monday, June 3rd, 2024. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, available across all major podcasting platforms, including YouTube, where you can now watch. If you're enjoying the show, consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this or watching it. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me, as always, is my friend, co-host, co-producer, and co-pilot on this adventure, Johnny, also known as Pixel Riffs if you've been under a block for the last 6 years.
Hello, welcome to episode 300, welcome to the new video format. And we've actually been trialing this new video format for a few weeks now with our patrons, who also get an exclusive behind-the-scenes extra post and pre-show every week on the Render Distance. That's the extended version of the podcast that you can get if you sign up to support us at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Our patrons also have a calendar of events they can look forward to. We had our monthly Minecraft Hangout for May, recorded this past weekend on June 1st, so everyone shared some screenshots of what they've been doing in the month of May. It was a really great time. Lots of colorful builds coming through, those kind of spring builds, lots of giant flowers being built and stuff like that. It was really cool to see a few trends within the community. We also have our quarterly hangout coming up in July. Date's still pending because I'm traveling for the first couple of weeks in July, but that's where you can learn the behind-the-scenes facts and figures of the podcast, how it's performing across all the platforms that we share it on, and we're excited to share some more figures about how changing to video is going to affect things on YouTube as well. We don't have a huge amount of time for our quick login this week because, of course, this is episode 300, and as we've mentioned in the last few episodes, we wanted to get a lot of quick-fire questions. We're doing a kind of full episode-long lightning round with questions from our community about what we wanted to talk about the podcast, Minecraft, personal stuff about us, like questions about where we get inspiration from for doing stuff in Minecraft and in, artistic lives, and that kind of stuff. So we're going to get to all of that after we've quickly shared what we've been up to in Minecraft this week, and then also read the news, because there's been some pretty big news on the week we decided to do our 300th episode. So it's all go here at Spawn Chunks HQ.
And I think 300 is also big news. If you had told me when we started this almost 6 years ago that we'd be catching up on my podcast that's 13 years old,
yeah, right.
I would be very surprised. But it's been a privilege and a lot of fun. And I don't want to say that it hasn't been a lot of work, but it's work that I really enjoy. And it is a big milestone episode, but also the top of the month. And this is where we normally thank our patrons for all of their support. But I'd like to extend that beyond just the people that support us financially on Patreon, but also to the listeners, people that are listening regularly, telling their friends about the show. We've seen an increase in listenership the last little while, and also just an increase in listener retention the last little while, which is something we do talk about on our quarterly hangouts. And it'll be cool to see what that does in terms of reach when we get to YouTube, when we can share video clips on social media and all that kind of thing, because it's something we have not really been able to do before, because audio clips don't seem to have quite the same reach on platforms like YouTube Shorts or TikTok and Instagram Reels, that kind of stuff. But a huge shout out and thank you to everybody that's watching, listening, and enjoying the show. And especially to all the people that wrote in. Man, there's a lot. You're in for a treat.
Yeah, I opened the spreadsheet earlier and I was like, are we going to get through all of this? So let's quickly log in and let us know what is up in our Minecraft lives. Let's start with you, Joel. What's new from the Citadel this week?
Well, I only had the one stream. I had episode 300 prep, and I had family to pick up the airport, so it was pumpkin farm. It is still pumpkin farming, as one would expect. But the fun part is that I'm creating my very first custom pumpkin patch. I've done a pumpkin farm in the past on the server, but it was a redstone farm, something that broke the pumpkins with pistons, collected them with water, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. This is just meant to look like a nice pumpkin field. So I'm integrating moss carpet, 2 high ferns that look sort of like pumpkin vines in the right kind of angle. Adding a lot of green. I'm using mangrove bushes and mangrove leaf blocks because they look kind of viney at the same time. And they go really well in, I believe the biome is a sunflower plains. So the green is quite bright and similar to plains. And it's working out pretty well. It's starting to fill in. It feels organized, but also has that kind of like chaos of pumpkins as they kind of grow in every which way. The hardest part so far is that I do want some of them to actually look like they're growing out of the ground. So to do that in the way that you want, you have to plant the pumpkin seeds, bone meal it to its almost top growth state, and then block all the different areas where you don't want the pumpkin to grow, so it'll grow in the direction that you want aesthetically. So that is a pain in the butt, and not hard. It's just that you're like, okay, cool. Well, you'll grow when you grow. I have to remember to check you in an hour, to see if it's the way that I want it. So that has been a little bit tricky. So it's taking a little bit longer. But I really like the pumpkin patch. It's almost like a corn maze. Like it kind of has some organization to it, but then they're a little helter-skelter, which I like. And so it's been going well. It's a learning process. I love it when I have something to do in Minecraft that I've never done before. And when you've been playing the game for as long as we have, that's always exciting. So, I mean, it is what it is. There's still more to come because there's more ground to cover. But I'm also going to be working in other things. There's I think I started a potato patch, and there's a couple of other smaller things that are going to round out the farm. But that's where we are with it. It's just kind of that early stage process of something like this.
You've got the player-head mini blocks on your server, right, on the Citadel?
I do.
I was going to say, have you considered juvenile pumpkins? Because there's definitely
I have now.
Because having grown a pumpkin completely by accident in our garden last year, they actually stay green for a really long time before they ripen into that orange color. So while like full melon blocks are probably going to look kind of out of place and really obviously like melons, because every Minecraft player knows them as melons, I think a couple of melon mini blocks mixed in with some pumpkin mini blocks would work really well to show a bit of variety of scale. Not to make even more work for you, when I'm sure like when you talked about this in the past, you've wanted it to be like, I'm moving on from the Citadel at a certain, or from West Hill at a certain point. But yeah, just food for thought, I suppose, if you'll forgive the pun.
No, that's great. No. Well, pumpkin pie is something I'm going to be putting inside the kitchen in the house, right?
Oh, good stuff.
Because it's a thing in Minecraft. But that's great. I haven't, it's probably because I haven't gotten to that level of detail yet, but you're right. The melons would be great. And very often, because of the Wandering Trades data pack that we have, when I go to the Wandering Trader, I'm very much thinking about grabbing blocks for future builds, like bright colored blocks for sci-fi, because I tend to have all the gray and the brown already for Westill. But yeah, I'll have to remember not to just like, no, I don't need pumpkins and melons. I certainly don't have any melons. I've used pumpkins before somewhere in a kitchen. I don't know where, but I've definitely used a pumpkin mini block. And it'll have that fun off-grid sort of feel because you can put them on angles, just like, wither skeleton skulls and stuff like that. So yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you. Perfect.
Yeah, no worries. I mainly thought of it because I've been renewing some jungle foliage as I completed my build on Minecraft SOS, and there are like 2 melons on top of this giant cylinder of terrain that I had recently rebuilt. I'm going to share some screenshots for it in our live show chat, and I won't get into the full details of it until next week, mainly for time, but because also Minecraft SOS is closing on Tuesday. So tomorrow is the final day of the server. We're all filming our finale episodes, and then the final episodes will go up on YouTube sometime towards the end of this week, maybe over the weekend. But yeah, pictures of this are also up on Twitter for anybody who wants to see it. I managed to complete the build that I had planned based on the Paul Chedaeusson short film Solstice 5. It's a huge cylinder of terrain surrounded by an enormous white concrete, diorite, and various other materials mining machine that's pulling it out of the ground, or some people in my stream chat even suggested it might be putting it in the ground, and this is like a machine that's building the world. Although I'm not sure how you'd build something in Minecraft out of a series of cylinders, considering that all of the corners would need to be filled in for it to be properly blocky. But yeah, this is one of the first projects I've actually managed to complete, I feel like. And it's all because the server has a deadline, right? We want it to be done by a certain time. It's conveniently timed perfectly for the announcement we're going to get to in the news segment about the release of the Tricky Trials update. And so being used to long-term worlds like Empires, where I never got to finish building the castle that I was kind of rushing at the last minute because I thought, well, now I have a limited amount of time to build it, but a huge scale in mind. And then on like Survival Guide, for example, I never finished the museum in Season 1 because the update came out and forestalled my progress on that. And in Season 2 of Survival Guide, the world felt very unfinished. In long-term worlds like this, you don't often reach the point where you complete a project unless you're working on it like you are with West Hill for like a few years, and you're like, right, this is the cutoff point. It feels done. I've been working on it consistently over this amount of time. It is finally time to move on. But this actually feels like a completed piece, and I've done everything that I set out to do, and I couldn't be happier.
This looks incredible. Seeing the full render distance shots where you can see the clouds coming at it about halfway up.
Yeah,
Like that. Like the scale is just monstrous. And I mean, we all knew this as you were talking about it over the last several weeks, months on the show. Something that I was not anticipating though was how the top is constructed, because so many of the screenshots have been from the bottom up, you know, looking up at the monolith of the structure. And I really like how beefy it is. Like it 100% just screams sci-fi without the same sort of things that you would see in a lot of sci-fi, like blinking lights and like smoke trails and like that kind of stuff, any kind of glowiness. It's all just structure, form, detail with the bands of, I'm assuming, either terracotta or concrete that give you like the orange and the blue color that kind of give like, you know, company mining branding or something like that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, really, really cool stuff. And I can't believe the scale of it. Like just redonkulous.
This is the scale that I was hoping to achieve the entire time, and I'm so happy it's paid off. If I had the time, and if I really wanted to go the whole hog and, like, you know, make this like one of those models that you'd see of like a Star Destroyer where they've got all of the additional kind of bumps and domes and dishes and like extra stuff attached to the outside, then I could have. That's certainly the case in the short film that inspired it, but I simply thought, what am I going to be able to achieve at this scale with the time I have? And we now have a world border encroaching on us on the server, so I can't go to a desert to mine sand anymore because that's actually cut off from the boundary of how far out we can go. So I've actually had to raid a couple of nearby beaches in order to get the sand just for the white concrete I needed to complete the build. And it's been a last-minute resource rush, but I've got it done. I'll say more about it in next week's show when I can kind of do a full recap of everything we did on Minecraft SOS. But yeah, the main thing to say is I'm just so happy I got this done.
And there's something to be said about something at this scale with that kind of brutalist, simplistic design. Like, even though you didn't have time to do all the little doodads and the greebling and all that, the fact that it's just so big and so smooth and so just gigantic, like just so ominous. It's like when you can't see the details of a Star Destroyer. Like, it just looks like a giant triangle flying through the sky, and it's just intimidating because of the sheer size of it, and it looks so simple. And there's something about that, I think, that feels alien, I guess, because anything that we would do as humans that flies has all kinds of moving parts and all kinds of shapes and things that are required of it. Whereas if it's like alien technology that we don't understand, like they can make a cube fly. I think that's why the Borg cubes are so intimidating too. Like, yes, there's a lot of detail up close, but from a distance, it's just a flying block. It's such a weird oxymoron that you're not anticipating.
Yeah, the monolithic quality of it was something I was really striving for. So the fact that it gives that impression, I feel like, yes, I've achieved exactly what I set out to do.
Mission accomplished, for sure.
Heck yeah.
Moving on with our mission today, we have a bunch of news to communicate. We will be giving a more abbreviated version of the news this week just for time. The Tricky Trials update official release date was announced on May 30th, 2024. Quote, the Tricky Trials update official release date is June 13th, which means that in just a few short weeks, you can play with all the new update features on both Minecraft Java Edition and Bedrock Edition. June 13th is next Thursday, just 10 days from now. The Minecraft.net article summarizes the features we know are coming in the Tricky Trials that we've been covering on the show the last couple of weeks. Trial chambers, the breeze, the bogged, and the vault. Ominous effects, the wind charge and the mace, the crafter, new copper blocks, and new paintings. For more details, you can check out the Minecraft.net article and also things like the Minecraft Java Edition 1.21 pre-release that was out last week. Quote, we're bringing you the first pre-release of 1.21 with the leashable boats, portable ender pearls, and bug fixes. With this snapshot, we are temporarily removing the functionality of lighting blocks on fire using the fire aspect enchantment as we want to refine it further. This functionality will be reintroduced in a later release. Changes in 1.21 pre-release 1. Mace attack speed has been changed to 0.6. Ender pearls that are thrown through portals can now teleport players to a different dimension. It is now possible to ride entities such as horses or minecarts through portals. Technical changes in 1.21 pre-release 1. The data pack version is now 46. There are a number of changes to enchantments, tags, and loot tables It's all a bit technical to read here, outlined on the show, but you can read everything on the Minecraft.net changelog linked in our show notes at thespawnchunks.com. Fixed bugs of note in 1.21 pre-release 1. That article also outlines a number of bug fixes, something we see more of when snapshots move to pre-release. There are a few fixes to behavior of the Obsidian platform that players arrive on in the end. Most of the bug fixes are related to the snapshots and related update features being refined.
The other big news this week, Netflix and Minecraft have announced a new Blocktastic series in the making. To quote this article from Minecraft.net, we're thrilled to announce that we've joined forces with Netflix to produce an animated series set in our Blocky universe. The series will tell an original story with new characters and reflect the world of Minecraft in a new light. It is currently in development by the talented studio Wild Brain, who are creators of Sonic Prime, Ninjago Dragons Rising, and Carmen Sandiego, and will debut exclusively on Netflix. We'll also link to the official announcement trailer on YouTube. It's just a simple 20-second video showing the Netflix N in a Minecraft environment. But yeah, it seems like an official Minecraft animated series is on the way.
I mean, we can start there because it's just a little teaser, but Netflix has done some pretty good animated series over the years with new and existing properties. I think about things like Troll Hunters or Transformers. They did some Cybertron anime stuff that was really good. And that comes from someone that used to work in animation, so I can be hard to impress sometimes. And I'm cautiously optimistic because sometimes the Minecraft offshoots don't go necessarily as I think they want them to. But I do feel like animation and Minecraft is a better pairing. And I think we might have at least a better understanding of that compared to anything else when we think about the trailers that they put in front of Minecraft Live. That always feels so fun and natural to see those CG animated villagers. Even the intro to Minecraft Dungeons, like the animated intro cinematics there, were all really well done and felt natural, even though it's a weird blocky kind of space. And we've also seen some decent adaptations of video games in the last little while. The Super Mario World movie was fantastic. Not World, just Super Mario Brothers movie was awesome. And so fingers crossed.
Yeah. I feel like I'm probably not going to be the intended audience, and I think it's still kind of odd that we're getting an animated series and a live-action movie. And I'm not sure how to feel about either, but I think it's fun that they're getting made. And ultimately, yeah, like if it's going to be like a family show for kids and parents to watch together and, you know, maybe gets the kids their Minecraft fix without them being attached to their iPad or their computer constantly, then parents are going to be happy about that potentially. Yeah, I think it's an exciting thing for Minecraft as a brand to announce with the amount of other partnerships and stuff that's been going on this last week. There's been loads of stuff happening on Twitch and like loads of little bonus things. Everyone seems like they are queuing up to help Minecraft celebrate their 15th year in the business. So yeah, I think it's exciting to see stuff on this scale getting made.
The movie, for me, it's a weird anticipation because I like Jason Momoa, but again, it's a weird idea. At the same time, Detective Pikachu was really fun. It wasn't perfect, but it was a good ride. You know, like I really enjoyed it. So they have the capability to make it look really good. Like if they take the time to do it right with the special effects, it could be really, really cool. The thing about the animation that I just thought of, I wonder how much of that could be considered like onboarding for younger kids, like ages 3 to 5 that aren't really maybe at a level where they can play Minecraft, but they watch Minecraft and then they get into the whole world. And then when they are old enough, they're like, wait a minute, this was one of my favorite shows a couple of years ago. Maybe I can play it now. It's interesting to see. And I think accessible too, because if you're a parent that doesn't play video games or you just don't have those skills, but you want to spend time with your kid who's 7 or 10 and you want to sit down and watch the Minecraft show, and it's appealing, especially if they do it in a way like similar to how Pixar, you know, has those kind of moments where like, okay, an adult will chuckle at something, then that could be really, really fun. Yeah.
I'm curious about it, and I think the thing that's maybe not quite working for me in the concept of there being an animated series is that Minecraft is so much about telling your own story, and so when people start telling different stories in Minecraft, I'm not certain quite how I'm supposed to connect with them. But then you look at what they've done with Minecraft Dungeons and even Minecraft Legends in terms of the stories they want to tell there. It's like a basic framework for the player to become the hero of. I kind of wonder how that translates to something that's a kind of sit back and enjoy it experience rather than an experience that you're more active in. But I'm sure we'll have a lot more to say about it once more stuff starts coming out about either the movie or the Netflix show, and we get to take a look at that ourselves. I'm sure we'll be able to do an episode in future of like reviewing some of the stuff that Netflix is putting out, or going to see the Minecraft movie and see how that goes.
That'll be fun. That'd be kind of fun to organize a local event too. Like if any listeners that are local here for me or local there for you, kind of get together and go watch the Minecraft movie.
Do a Spawn Chunks watch along. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
That'd be kind of fun. How do you feel about the release date?
I am surprised, honestly. I was surprised and delighted, first of all, that it wasn't releasing while I'm going to be away in the USA during the first couple of weeks of July. We do have this running joke on the show that, yes, they seem to announce a lot of stuff or have events while I'm away on holiday doing whatever else. But yeah, some folks in my Twitch chat this week let me know that both 1.20 and 1.19 were released June 7th of their respective years. So it's something that was probably fair to assume we would see the update in June. I just hadn't clocked that they were that regular with their releases at this point. And maybe it was the fact that we got armadillos and wolf armor in 1.20.5 that kind of threw off my like update clock, but it did seem like a reasonable expectation that we'd see the update sometime in early June. So yeah, the fact that it's only a few days later than the previous updates have been shows that they're on a pretty regular release schedule now. But in the meantime, we got pre-release 1 as well, so we have a few extra things being kind of snuck in at short notice, like Java Edition being able to put leads on boats is kind of huge. More huge than I think a lot of Java players give it credit for, because this is one of those things that's been in Bedrock Edition forever, and Bedrock Edition players know that if you can attach a lead to a boat that has a villager in it, you can get that villager up a hill very easily just by dragging the lead, because obviously entities attached to leads will kind of like try and catch up to the player a little bit. There's that rubber banding effect that takes place. So if you're climbing a hill to get your villager up to an area that they seem stubbornly insistent on moving away from, back to, you know, the river or whatever you've just used to ferry them in, I think it's great that we can now attach leads to boats. It's going to make moving mobs around a little bit easier. And we also have the option to bring boats and minecarts with passengers through nether portals now, thanks to the changes that they've made to that. So I think, honestly, they are removing a lot of the pain points that were brought up around some of the stuff like the villager changes, right? Like a lot of people were saying, I don't want to have to go to a swamp or a jungle or whatever to get swamp and jungle villagers if that means it's going to be really painful bringing them back to my central area where I want to start a villager trading hall. And I don't know if these changes are in service of a villager trading rebalance and pushing those mechanics forward, but it has at least brought up enough feedback that they seem to be addressing with updates like this.
For me, I think that moving boats around with the leads, I mean, it makes sense in terms of Minecraft. It does make a lot of sense as far as putting a rope on a boat and dragging it across the grass, but it makes sense for me. I'm also thinking about some of the boats that I've used for decoration around West Hill that get bumped by squid and moved out of where I want them to stay.
Yeah.
And so I'll be really happy if I can put a lead on a boat and then attach that to a fence post, just like you can leash a cow or a chicken or anything else to a fence post, and keep that boat from at least going not too far. I don't know whether the leads will break, because that will be annoying if the squid is powerful enough to break the lead on a boat. But that would, I think, be nice. I really hope we can get something graphical with leads, like, you know, you can tether it to a fence post, but you have to have it attached to an entity for it to stay there.
Yeah.
I guess the good news is now you could do that with a boat and hide the boat instead of having a chicken clucking just at a view, you know, as you're trying to add that rope wrapped around texture to your build. So the creative kind of like sub-block detail player in me is excited about that. And the Ender Pearl portal thing and the entity portal thing, for me, I'm sure there's people that are a lot smarter than I am that are going to come up with some very cool things to be able to do. There's the interdimensional Ender Portal stasis teleportation device that I'm sure somebody is working on. I mean,
of course, yeah.
You can only say that when you have this for a job, but it's one of those things that I can see being really, really useful or cool for either mini games or any kind of player experience where, you know, you're on a SMP that's vanilla and you want to create an a certain player experience that otherwise you'd have to go with like a custom server or something with commands. But if you don't have that, then you could use ender pearls and all this kind of stuff to move players around, and it could be really, really fun.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that riding entities through portals is now the default. They had a tentative rollout of this with a game rule in the last snapshot, and now there's effectively a buff to minecarts and ender pearls that nobody expected, but now everyone is excited for. And I think it's worth noting, because a couple of people were playing around with these mechanics in the Minecraft Reddit, so I was keeping half an eye on that just to see what people would do with it. And you can throw an ender pearl through a portal and out the other side in the nether into another portal that leads back through to the overworld, but that only works if you can insta-travel through portals like you can in creative mode, which isn't the default in Java. You think there's that sort of few seconds of portal animation that plays before you travel through to the neighboring dimension. That can be adjusted using a game rule that is called Player's Nether Portal Default Delay. It's a bit of a mouthful, but I found that on the wiki because I was fairly certain they'd implemented that in a previous snapshot or a previous version. And you can modify that so that you can travel instantly through portals in survival, and it doesn't do the kind of wind up and cool down that it does for regular nether portal travel. So I wonder if we're going to see servers tinker with that so that kind of multi-portal networking is possible. Like, I could see somebody like Hermitcraft having a field day with this if they were willing to modify the default game rules a little bit to accommodate stuff like that. They could have a really interesting transport system if that was the case.
Yeah, that would be really, really wild. It reminds me of a mod that I can't remember the name of, but it was something that removed the portal and the experience of teleporting and just basically gave you a doorway that you would walk through and you would end up in the nether and you could see it. So as you walked around, the nether would be kind of like in this weird kind of like one-sided mirror teleportation thing where like you could see and walk through it, but if you went around behind the portal there was nothing there. And it reminds me of that. Like, if I was to throw an ender pearl into that mod, this is what I would expect to happen, right? Like, you just land in the nether where the ender pearl hit the ground, right? Or whatever the next object was.
Immersive Portals, I think, is the mod you're thinking of for anybody at home who wants to check that out. And yeah, it's a really cool effect. And you can see, I think, for processing reasons, why it doesn't happen. It's kind of like implementing Portal, the Valve video game, into Minecraft. It's like rendering a ton of stuff from another dimension every time you walk around near a nether portal. But it's, a really exciting mechanic. And so I'm curious if stuff like that filters its way through into regular gameplay, and if they decide to maybe tinker with how long it takes for players to get into the nether by default in order to accommodate some interesting gameplay stuff in future.
I do sort of like the animation. Like, I kind of like the RP of going into the portal and having, like, you know, a little Wayne's World, like, doodle-doo, doodle-doo, before you
before
you go through. So I like that separation, but I guess depending on how useful you find it or what the benefits are, it might be worth getting rid of it. Or, I mean, maybe if there's something that could be modified with textures or that experience, have it just be faster, like still have something happen in front of you visually, but move it. But I also know a lot of people that have removed some of the portal experience because of like motion sickness and stuff. We have it reduced. It's not completely removed, but it's a lot less wobbly for us on the Citadel. And that was just like a, player request, that consensus.
Yeah, I think it's not something that we're going to see everybody play around with, but I expect a lot of people will want to at least give that a go in future. And yeah, I think having the portal cooldown there makes sense because you don't want to be popping through portals all the time. Sometimes you just want to like hop into one, take the coordinates, and be able to link it to a portal in the nether, that kind of thing. So there are reasons, I think, to avoid that, but it depends what everyone's willing to get used to in terms of default gameplay.
Moving into what will be the rest of this epic episode, we are going to be talking about our episode 300 Q&A, which is just a pile of one-sentence emails or one-sentence questions that we have been curating from the community over the last month or so. We have just a lot of different topics to cover, everything from Minecraft to podcasting, video games inspiration, expertise, just about anything that we felt kind of fit the the vibe of the show. We obviously cannot include everyone's questions, and there were also some questions that overlapped. So we've tried to curate them into little segments, and so try to give a shout out for people that had similar questions, that kind of thing. Everyone that wrote in had either a congrats, a short story to share about how they found the show, how much they liked the show. We've read them all. We really appreciate the kind words. It's so nice to hear. We've trimmed the emails down just to the questions, just for time and to have things flow correctly. So if your email has been edited, it's purely for just time and recording. And a huge shout out to Rainbow Email Sheep of Doom, the person that has helped us organize the emails over the week and allowed Johnny and I to go in and then curate an organized selection of emails and get ready for the show. Could not have done it without you. I really, really appreciate it, as does Johnny. And if in the future you would like to email the show, those emails go to spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. They no longer have to be one sentence, although it's preferable if they're short, because it does allow us to fit them in the show a little bit easier. So if you've got things to talk about, if you've got responses to this episode, if you've got things that are, you want to talk about with the leads and the portals and things that just happened in the snapshots, then send that into spawnchunkmail@gmail.com.
Yeah, I expect future weeks are going to be full of exciting experiences from the Tricky Trials update, and probably people complaining about how difficult it is to get the mace, but we'll see how that works out. In the meantime, we're going to dive into this huge list of questions, starting with a personal category. We're going to be just answering a couple of questions about work-life balance, starting with this one from Janoy. How do you feel about your work-life balance in a line of work that can easily bleed over into your downtime? Also, a quick shout out to MGG and Friends, who also asked about managing work-life early on.
For me, especially as someone that has been an entrepreneur for the better part of his adult life, I feel like it's pretty good overall. And I think the lessons that I've learned, especially when you have something like this that has a schedule, has prep time, and has some stuff outside of the actual recording time, like publishing and social media and things like that, and keeping up on things, researching things. I think keeping a schedule and trying to be as true to the schedule as you can really does help. And that includes social scheduling. One of the things that I've done over the last few months, actually a year and a bit, has been a monthly scheduled hangout in person with some of my friends down at a local pub. And it's every third Thursday. It's something we all try not to miss. And because we and everybody's family and partners know about it, then it's worked around as opposed to tried to fit in. And I think that really helps with the work-life balance, especially working from home. The other thing I think for me would be another social thing would be the gym. I try to hit the gym a lot. And it's funny how when you prioritize things like your downtime, it also makes you a lot more efficient with your work time. And so that for me is I think where the work-life balance is. It's hard to seep in though. I've definitely had issues where I was streaming every day or 2 different games a day because I was like excited about a new game or excited about a new thing, and then felt burnt out, by the end of the week, and realized while I've had fun, I also have been technically working for 7 days without a day off. And like it catches up with you pretty quick. I'm not sure about you.
Yeah, I've found that having at least one day off a week that I guarantee is a day off is good for work-life balance, especially with a game that you can hop into and out of as easily as you can, Minecraft. I've also found that when I'm in Minecraft, I don't tend to play like a casual Minecraft world on the side or anything. So whenever I'm in Minecraft, I am working, and I play other games in my downtime, and I think that's also one of the important parts of playing this game as a full-time job, is that you've got some degree of separation between hobby gaming and work gaming, which, I mean, if you told me work gaming was a thing when I was a kid, I'd be like, what on earth? Like, that doesn't quite sound good to me somehow, but no, it's working out. This is a question you probably have to ask my partner if you wanted, like, the proper, like, outside view, a slightly more balanced opinion on how the work-life balance is working out for me, but yeah, having at least one day off, picking up other hobbies as well. Like I've been kind of a keen gardener since last year when we really started to grow stuff in our garden, and we still take time every day to go out and check on how our plants are growing and stuff like that. And it's just a good idea to get outside and get some fresh air at least. Like touch grass has become a bit of a meme in the gaming community, but the intent behind it I think is honest, and that's what I try and do a little bit more of these days.
Next email comes from Fire Dragon 19, an ore producer in our community. That's a member of our Patreon. I drive a lot, and I'm looking into some new music. What do you listen to? I like a wide variety, so throw whatever you have at me.
You want to start? You want to go for this one?
Sure. It's funny because I'm not a big music guy. I honestly am usually behind as the newest, coolest stuff. I'm also a creature of habit. So I do listen to a mix, though. I have a variety of things I like. I like classic rock, Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, Motley Crue. That's usually on my workout playlist. 90s to early 2000s hip hop. That's a bit of nostalgic just because that's kind of like when I was listening to that with a bunch of friends in school. However, I do like singer-songwriters as well. Currently, I've been listening to a lot of Mark Ambor, Miles Smith. I also like classic jazz, Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald. So it depends. Like jazz and stuff is like wintertime, Christmassy stuff, you know. And then I find spring, summer is more the rock and the hip hop. And I didn't write this down, but when I run, which I haven't done in a while, but when I do go for jogs, I'm very often listening to orchestral scores from like Avengers, Superman, like the different How to Train Your Dragon, just anything with like an upbeat, adventurous kind of vibe to it. It's weird. You'd think I'd be listening to like techno or something heavier, but no, the hard stuff comes when I'm lifting weights. That's the classic rock. What about you?
Nice. My recent favorites include Antomai by the Deer Hunter. I like a lot of prog kind of music, like whether it's kind of old 70s, 80s kind of prog acts or more recent like progressive metal kind of stuff. So on the heavier side, Colors by Between the Buried and Me, and This Place Will Become Your Tomb by Sleep Token, like two albums that I've had playing in the background whenever I'm just doing like grindy work in Minecraft, or sometimes just in the background when I'm writing stuff for Hermitcraft Recap. Like sometimes it's just fun to have something familiar on in the background, and for whatever reason the heavier stuff seems to work. If you want something a little bit lighter, check out Man with a Movie Camera by the Cinematic Orchestra, and that's an album I've been listening to for probably about 20 years at this point. It was introduced to me by like a play I did with my local Amdram group when I was like in my mid-teens, and it's just stuck with me. It's one of those records that if I want something kind of light and ambient but still kind of rhythmic and interesting in the background, I always end up putting that on. So give those a look. Next up, Mossy Park, on the subject of music, asks what our favorite video game soundtracks are other than Minecraft.
So that would be World of Warcraft for me, all of them. Because I played that game for a number of years and listened to the soundtracks just walking around town because I absolutely love them. Russell Brower is just very, very talented. And Assassin's Creed Black Flag would be the other one that comes to mind. I have not played a lot of games as an adult that I kind of remember the soundtrack sticking out for me, but Black Flag is one of them. That was my first Assassin's Creed game. It was the first, or one of the first games I played through to completion, like on an Xbox as an adult. And the soundtrack to that is just, it's fantastic, especially if you like things like Pirates of the Caribbean, Hans Zimmer, that kind of thing. It's very similar in that vein.
Yeah, there's a guy called Sean Dager who I believe did a lot of the sea shanty work on Black Flag, and he is somebody else who I've seen collab with the Longest Johns, who are a sea shanty singing group from the UK, who I've gotten into since their Sea of Thieves videos and a few things like that. So that's a fun one, and I feel like a lot of people got into sea shanties around the pandemic as well, so it's kind of funny how that stuff comes back around. For me, I own a few video game soundtracks on vinyl. I've started collecting vinyl recently, and there's a few of my favorites that I do have on vinyl now, and that includes Sayonara Wild Hearts, which is like a rhythm game, endless runner kind of modeled thing, which is really kind of fun. It's on Switch and PC, I think, so worth checking out. Transistor, although all of Supergiant games have fantastic soundtracks, Transistor is probably my favorite. The soundtrack to Hades 2 is shaping up to be incredible as well. On the more chiptuney kind of classic video game sound, I will definitely recommend Undertale and Celeste as some really amazing chiptune music. Stardew Valley has a wonderful soundtrack, as does Eastward. And lately, of course, I've been obsessed with Elden Ring again, so the soundtrack to Elden Ring really fits that orchestral score stuff you were talking about. Like, I would probably do some running to the soundtrack to Elden Ring. I feel like that I'd probably be running away from like a dark horseman who's about to hew me down with a poleaxe or something, but still, that's a good recommendation, I think.
I've seen some screenshots from the latest DLC, and I imagine the music that goes with those boss encounters is high octane.
yeah, there's some pretty intense fights in there. So yeah, looking forward to seeing how they expand it with the DLC.
Next question is from Captain Graham 90. What are your favorite podcasts? At the moment, I am listening to Modern Wisdom, Diary of a CEO, Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum, Daily Tech News Show, the More Money podcast, that's kind of a specific Canadian financial show, and the Sackhoff Show, to be a little bit more whimsical. That's Katie Sackhoff, who plays Bo-Katan in Mandalorian. So she's
fun.
hanging out with celebrity guests and friends and actors. A lot of them are either directors. Her interview, two interviews that stand out really, really well in the last few months were Bryce Dallas Howard. That was an amazing conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And Bryce Dallas Howard, of course, directed Katie Sackhoff in one of the Mandalorian episodes, or several.
Yeah.
And then she recently sat down with Kevin Bacon, and Kevin Smith, sorry. Kevin Smith basically lassoed the interview and interviewed her for the first 15 minutes because he's a big Battlestar fan.
He'll turn a podcast around on you, Kevin Smith. He's a wily one. You got to be careful. It's podcast Aikido. He'll use your energy against you.
Exactly. But it was such a natural conversation. Obviously, all of these have to come with like an adult language and potentially adult content warning, because some of them are like self-help and talk about mental health or talk about diet and fitness and exercise, and sometimes the hosts swear, sometimes they don't, sometimes the guests swear, sometimes they don't. So just keep that in mind as you're going through that list. What about you? What podcasts are you listening to right now?
So yeah, I will echo the language content warning. Yeah, blanket like adult language warning for everything that I tend to listen to because I'm a human adult. But in terms of video game stuff, I listen to the Besties podcast more or less every week. That's how I found out about a couple of recent games that I've really enjoyed, like Animal Well. They talked about Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. There's a remake of that coming out on Switch that I'm considering checking out as I travel in July and need something to play on like a handheld device. But then I also listen to the Habibis, which is 3 Arab game developers, kind of talking about the stuff that they've been working on, the stuff that they've been playing. Rami Ismail is a guy I've been following on Twitter for a while and found the podcast through him since he's one of the hosts. A really, really cool show. Highly recommend that. Alongside that, I listen to not another D&D podcast or NAD pod, but I mostly listen to the episodes of that where they judge and kind of provide their own rulings on cases where somebody feels like they have been wronged in D&D. They do a show called Dungeon Court where they kind of debate cases and decide whether or not the players or the DMs were right or wrong in certain situations. Alongside that, I'll recommend Sad Boys, Never Post, and Morning Somewhere. Never Post is a great show just about the internet, and Sad Boys and Morning Somewhere are just kind of talking about topical stuff and what's going on in their lives. But yeah, we'll recommend all of those if, once again, you're okay with adult language. Next question comes in from Theo. This is specifically one for Joel. It says, Joel, do you have any advice for building a business and an identity, as I'm an artist in my spare time, but I'd love for it to become something I can make a living from in future? Pix also chime in here, given that you've also built a successful brand as a creator. I will preface by saying my creative brand has a lot more to do with luck than any kind of solid strategy, so I think I'll turn this over to you, Joel, since you have a much more cogent answer for this one.
Well, I'll put a giant asterisk here in that I'm not really doing it full time anymore as an artist. I've kind of pivoted into content creation and podcasting. But at first, I would say use your name where possible. I seem to have questions like this come up in my chat sometimes on Twitch, and it's often from like, Orange Platypus 97 wants to know how to do life as an artist. And then like the first thing is like businesses, which is where you will be doing most of your work if you want to work as an like say just for example a commercial illustrator, which is what I was doing. Businesses will want to do business with you as a person. You can do a studio name if you want, if you're worried about anonymity. But that just creates another hoop, because then people have to remember that the studio is you. And if it's just you right now, then you'd be better off having your name recognized. There's also a bit of honesty that comes with that. By using my real name everywhere when I was first starting out, it kept me from doing anything silly online as a young person. My kind of mode of operation was always like, if it's something that my grandmother wouldn't approve of, then I'm not saying it on the internet. And same with my art. Now, I'm also dealing with, I was a cartoonist and illustrator, so I was doing with pretty safe art anyway. So I didn't mind. It also makes you very searchable. If someone meets you at a party or at a family gathering or somewhere like, oh yeah, I'd like to get them to draw me something, I just have to remember their name. I don't have to remember their studio, some weird web address, that kind of stuff. I think that right now, digital work has a lot less overhead. I started off doing a combination of stuff on paper, commissions for people, that kind of stuff. And digital work is just, you don't have to ship it. There's a lot less involved when you're starting out. And you can also, if you, depending on what you're doing, you can retain the rights to, like, if you do a commission for somebody for, like, let's say you're doing an avatar for their D&D campaign, but if it's a really cool image of a dragonborn that you want to just use on like a pin or something like that, you can talk to them and say, hey, look, this is your original drawing, but because I created it, can I then sell merch on my website? And you can kind of use digital in that way, whereas you can't really do that very well with traditional stuff. As far as the business side, I would say do some research, take a business course if you can. Use contracts and make sure that they're very, very clear. If you don't have that kind of language in you, pay someone. It doesn't cost very much to have like a deal memo, something that you can swap out, like your info, the client info. That way you both know what's being expected, because nothing is going to take the wind out of your sails starting off as an artist, as a contractor, is if you get screwed over in a contract that really isn't your idea. Something like signing up to do something and then somebody decides, oh, they've got 10 or 15 revisions, and you're just like, all of a sudden this $200 or $500 contract is now just terrible money because you're spending 60 hours making changes. Just making sure that everybody has the same expectations. And I think that the tough part right now about building a brand and being unique is there's a lot of AI stuff happening with art. I'm not sure if anybody in our communities is up to speed on what's happening with Instagram right now and Meta and its AI scraping, but like it is all over the place. And there's a lot of artists that are just like, peace out Instagram, I'm no longer posting my art here. So you do have to be aware of that now as you're posting art online. So do some research into AI, find sites that are either like advertising that they don't allow scraping, or ask for like opt-in. I believe artstation.com now has like a tag or a switch that you can say, please don't allow scraping on this image because I don't want it to be scraped by AI. But the other battle that you're going to be having is with clients that are just like, well, here, why do I want to hire you to do something when I can just get AI to do it? So this is where building your own brand and leaning into your own unique style. As you're learning, sure, it's important to take inspiration from other artists and other people, but I would say, if you can establish your own thing early on, especially right now, if it's hard for AI to emulate or to copy and assimilate, then you'll be better off. Because if you can, because what AI cannot do is duplicate the heart, the originality of work. It's fast, but it looks fast. It looks homogenized. And for people that want that and are willing to pay for that, then I think a lot of, it could be just because I'm an artist and I'm part of that community, but there's just a lot of judgment for, I think, that stuff. People are just seeing just a lot of fluff with not a lot of substance. So substance and bringing whatever you do in a unique kind of way. It's the same thing with podcasting and any kind of stuff we do online, like there's just so much out there that the more unique that you can be and true to yourself, then you will find your audience. Like that could be drawing, cartoons, avatars for your favorite knitting podcast. Like who knows? It could be so specific, but you got to start somewhere. And I would say that would be a good thing to focus on, is like what interests you, and approach it like a business from the start, but then also like take a look around you. Don't just go out onto the internet thinking that you're the only one doing this and then realizing, oh crap, there's just a lot of other people doing the same thing. I think that staying true to you, but also looking around and seeing what you can do to be unique is probably the best. That's probably the longest answer I could possibly give.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm sure Theo's gotten a great deal of good advice out of that.
Next one comes from mdog95, a landscape artist in our community. You both had other careers previous to and in tandem with your content creation as you built your audiences and platforms. What was the catalyst that made you decide to retire from your past careers and do content creation full time?
Well, I only went full time once I was making significantly more money than in any of my other work, and that seemed stable enough that I was going to be able to continue doing that. And I think that's the most important thing, really. Like, we'd all love to have a job where we could, like, retire and just create art forever, but if you're not making any money and you don't have a great deal of savings, then that's going to dry up pretty fast, and you're going to have to go back to doing whatever it was you were doing before. So when Survival Guide got popular and I was starting to see subscribers rolling in, I thought, okay, I'll monitor this for at least like 6 months or so and see if there's some kind of fall off and people aren't paying attention anymore, and everyone just kind of comes in. I'd seen viral hits come and go where a channel will have like a couple of million views on one video and then 100 or so on some of the others, and it's important to maintain a steady flow of income. So that was the most important thing. Boring though that answer is, I realized that the catalyst was, I'm now making more money at this than I am in anything else that I'm doing. It's time to give this a fair shake and put the time back into it, reinvest that money into continuing to grow and getting better equipment and just kind of setting yourself up to do that full time.
Yeah, I equate the experience to the difference between me taking an art class once a day in high school and then going to university where art class was all day, every day.
Yeah.
And when you can reach that point from a content creation perspective where the time and money, which is my answer as well, I know it's not the most romantic, but when the time and money is something that's so close that you can live off modestly the content creation, but then you also understand, like, man, if I just had the extra 40 hours a week that I'm putting into this other thing and allocated that, or even part of that, to this new thing, then I know it could be successful, because you can only get it so far when it's like a weekend warrior type situation where you're only able to do content creation 10 hours a week. That said, I don't know if I really consider myself as flipping to full-time anything, because I do still do some design contracts from time to time. But the lovely thing about the success of this podcast and my content creation is that it allows me to choose those contracts. I have to be excited about them. They have to be good money. Usually they're with return clients, which is great because then you already know how to work together. So that is nice. But also, I think I still approach what I do as not just one thing, but several little things. One of my frustrations, and this is not to make Theo worry about their future as an artist, but I was finding it very difficult to convince people to pay me for some of the things that I wanted to do that didn't require just like 60-hour work weeks with what I was doing with art. And so I needed to supplement that. And when you realize that you can do something like podcasting, or in my case, streaming, where there's no editing after streaming, like it's really just time in the chair and you're done. And if you can bring in some revenue from that, it's better investment in terms of time for revenue. And that then frees you up to do better things. So like I still have like a juggling aspect of where all my eggs are not in a freelancing basket as far as art goes. I've got podcasting, I've got streaming, I do have still some design on the side, and I'm always kind of like looking for other opportunities. Sometimes it's a new podcast, sometimes it's other ideas that I haven't really seen through yet. But I think that the catalyst for me is definitely that time and money thing. And I think the biggest draw right now is also what we talked about earlier about the work-life balance, in that because I can work with people like you on the Spawn Chunks, it means that I don't have to do everything myself. And the Spawn Chunks was one of those things that really helped me free up my time to either just invest in myself for personal time, or to invest in other things behind the scenes that I just normally wouldn't have time to do, because like the moment that I finished my podcast, I would also have to edit it, and then I would also have to go immediately back to whatever art contract I have. But now, with help on a show and like that 50-50 partnership that we have, it frees up some of that time, and it allows me to have multiple income streams. And I think that's a important thing to think about when you're going to go full time and what that catalyst is that it's a lot easier to make that transition when you're not taking all eggs from one basket and putting them in one other one. If you're taking the eggs from your full-time job basket and you're putting them in 2 or 3 other little baskets, then you have a higher success rate because you don't know which ones are going to sink and swim. One might rise up and be the leader, one might fall. I think it's better to be diverse if you can.
Yeah, I think as solo, as like sort of individual sole traders, that we are, I think that makes a lot of sense. But what you were saying before about being able to make this kind of show a partnership, I think finding the right sort of people to build a team around is going to be really important to certain lines of work. So yeah, like that's another thing. If you find a bunch of people, say in Minecraft as an example, if you find a bunch of people who are willing to do the behind the scenes production stuff that you can be the face of, and you can coordinate a way that everybody gets an even share of the revenue that you make or whatever, then that's also another completely valid way to do things. I don't think it's quite the way either of us do things, but if you have people that you can rely on, then that's a sign that, yeah, maybe you've got a good thing going. These last few questions are a little bit more whimsical before we move on to stuff that's more specifically about the podcast. Max asks, do either of you follow any sports? And if so, what teams?
I don't anymore, but the sport that I grew up playing was basketball. I'm tall. I'm about 6'1" and have been since I was 14. So at the time, you play ball. And I was following the Chicago Bulls before they won their championship. So Jordan was still very much a rock star, but it was before they did their first three-peat. So I was very much a Bulls fan. And then later a Lakers fan. When Jordan retired, I really enjoyed watching Kobe and Shaq. That was probably around my university days. Also the Raptors, just because they were the first Canadian NBA team. And I do really enjoy American football, but I don't follow it regularly. Like I will be invested in the Super Bowl. I will follow a team and I will root. I understand what's going on. I watched college ball like live at Mount A when I was there, but I don't really follow any sports currently. How about you?
I married into a Niners family, if we're sticking with the American football stuff, so I sort of know what's going on with American football now, which is rare for people in the UK, but they've played a couple of games at Wembley, I think, Wembley Stadium, so like the sport is getting a foothold in the UK. We all just still think it's a weirder version of rugby. But personally, football is the one that always comes up from like people in my stream chat who see, oh, you're British, you must follow football. I don't really. I live in Brighton, so I kind of loosely follow Brighton and Hove Albion Football Club, but mostly I just check results to kind of see how town is doing. More into tennis generally. Like I've watched tennis from a younger age. My parents put it on the TV. My partner and I both really enjoy tennis, and we've been to Wimbledon a few times in person, which is always great, and it's very affordable if you go early and you can like line up at 6 a.m. to get like day tickets. But we don't follow specific players necessarily, especially now there aren't too many kind of strong British prospects for winning major tournaments and stuff. But yeah, we just enjoy watching professional tennis, which is much more of a one-on-one thing than following teams, so you can kind of root for whichever player you like in that sense.
Caitlin would like to know, what is or are your favorite animals in real life?
I enjoy pets of all kinds. I am more of a cat person. I have owned 2 cats in the past that were my partners when they moved over to the UK from the US. 2 cats followed within a couple of years. And yeah, we spent a delightful couple of years with them before they both unfortunately passed away before we moved to this house. So before like 2017. And we haven't had any animals since then, but there are a lot of cats in the neighborhood, so we're always going around like shaking paws, checking in with the locals. But yeah, we really enjoy going to the local park and seeing everybody walk their dogs as well. So I'm just a general animal lover. Instagram right now keeps showing me Highland cows, which are the ones with like the fringe that kind of covers their eyes a lot of the time. Capybaras and wombats seem to be the 3 animals that keep coming up, and I'm not complaining. How about you, Joel?
So you like the large furries when it comes to
I think
non-pets.
And anything that like can't see because it's just got like droopy hair in front of its eyes, for whatever, it automatically gets points for me. I'm like that with Pokemon designs as well. Like anything that just looks like a big haystack that you can't see its face, incredible. Like 10 out of 10.
I think at some point in our 300 episodes, you mentioned that sheepdogs are a favorite dog breed.
Yeah, old English sheepdogs, yeah.
Yeah, it's like Sam the sheepdog from Warner Brothers has that like red fringe that he can't see out of, and when you do see his eyes, it's really dramatic because like Wile E. Coyote pushes up his hair and it's like he's scowling at him or something. It's very intense.
People in the UK might be familiar with the Dulux paint adverts. They had a very kind of shaggy Old English sheepdog as their mascot. They probably still do, and yeah, for whatever reason, I always really like the look of that dog.
I'm a dog person. By far, I'm actually allergic to cats, so they're nice to look at from afar, but I do not feel well.
The cats didn't give you a chance, yeah.
No, they did not. But I like big dogs, specifically American bullies. In the last few years, got turned on to bully breeds and very quickly found the biggest one, which is no surprise. I tend to just go for big dogs. I'm also a fan of Irish Wolfhounds. I don't know if I would own them anytime soon. I do want to get an American bully, but Irish Wolfhounds only live like 6 or 8 years. Like they're not very long lived because they're big dogs like Great Danes. They don't have a long lifespan. But American bullies are more like 13 or 15 years, depending on the breeding. And I will point people towards my current bully crush, which is Life Woof Maya, WOOFMAYA. On Instagram. She's an American bully here in Canada. I think she's in Ontario. And I also really like Miko_XL bully. That is a bully in the UK, actually, dealing with a lot of struggles with the recent ban of the breed in the UK, which is just, we won't get into the politics of it.
Sure.
But not the right move, in my opinion. However, they're just big teddy bears. They're muscular looking dogs, but their demeanor is so nice. They're very similar to Staffies in terms of their demeanor, because Staffordshire Terriers were one of the breeds used to make the XL bully. So they have that kind of like nanny dog vibe. They're gentle giants, but I really, really like them. As far as animals that are not pets, I've always liked the big ones, like lions, elephants, like usually anything non-North American, because it just feels so different, you know?
Yeah.
I don't like birds. Ostriches freak me out. Emus, they're just too.
I find ostriches hilarious, and I don't know quite why. It's just something about the long legs and the big kind of bushy body. But yeah, I wouldn't want to get anywhere near one because they are savage.
No, there's a great stand-up comedy clip with Kevin Hart talking about an ostrich chasing him and a buddy in a car, and and he's like terrified of wild animals, and that's how I feel about the big birds. I'm okay. It's weird. Like I wouldn't be scared of a lion at a zoo or even just to go in a petting zoo if they're a situation where it's tame. But I wouldn't want to go anywhere near an ostrich. There's something about the way that birds, and you know how small their brains are, it just feels so unpredictable. You know, or at least a lion, you kind of know what it might do.
Yeah.
I'm probably speaking completely wrong here for people that know more about these animals than I do. But and if we're really going to go down the rabbit hole, I have always loved dinosaurs. Like as a kid, dinosaurs, I know they don't exist anymore, but obviously just, again, that big animal. And I think that's why I like elephants so much, is like they feel like that sort of massive, impression. I went to a circus when I was a kid and I got to ride an elephant, and it blew my mind because it was like you're 10 feet off the ground. Like it was wild.
Yeah, that's cool. If you want a horror story about emus, I'm pretty sure there's a really great puppet history episode about the one time Australia declared war against emus and then lost. So check that out if you want a good laugh. Next, we'll move on to the last question from the personal category. This is Fizzy Busy Bee. We asked for short and sweet emails, so they simply asked, what is your favorite dessert?
Pie. Apple pie.
Nice. I vote for tiramisu. I think tiramisu is one of the perfect desserts, as long as you don't mind something that's a little bit rich. It's got alcohol, it's got like cake layer, it's got cream, it's got chocolate. And yeah, all of those things together, perfect. I've been to an Italian restaurant where my father-in-law enjoyed the tiramisu so much, not even being a particularly techno-savvy guy, he immediately got his phone out and started filming us. Just like, this is the best tiramisu ever. These are the people enjoying the tiramisu. And so I feel like, it can turn somebody from, a tech Luddite into a tech lover simply through taste.
Amazing. The next few questions are going to be about the podcast. From Judd, how did you two meet? How did the Spawn Chunks get started? And we'll have a shout out to Sheepscalibur, a landscape artist in our community, Rob or Mad Hatter 247, Martin, and Elena, who all also asked about the origins of the podcast, how we met, how it all got started. I'll kind of give a brief summary here, and Johnny, feel free to chime in whenever you want. I started playing Minecraft in, I want to say 2017, and quickly got very into it, and then decided that I wanted to learn more, and I did not always have time to go on YouTube. And so I wanted a podcast, and I couldn't find one. And I had become a fan of Johnny through, I think it was, what was the server that you were on? Decidedly Vanilla?
Yeah, Decidedly Vanilla would have been around the time that it was probably season 4, I think, must have been the...
I think so.
Yeah.
Floating pillars in the sky, the obelisks.
Yes,
I remember that. Yeah.
Ark Survival Evolved and Horizon Zero Dawn inspired builds in a jungle somewhere. Yeah. Punching above my weight, I think, at that stage, but having a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah. So I had become a fan, and I was looking to do a podcast, but I knew, because I was, at the time, I think I was still doing Comics Coast to Coast. I had the Citadel Cafe, and I knew I didn't have time to solo one, nor did I know enough about the game. Really got the impression that Johnny knew a lot about the game. And so I invited Johnny to come on the Citadel Cafe to talk about his Minecraft stuff, the content he was doing, because the builds were really neat, nerdy, and like you said, video game related. So it made for a good fit for the sci-fi stuff on the Citadel Cafe. And it was also a bit of a test to see, like, well, I wonder how Johnny and I could vibe on a podcast together. We hit it off.
Yeah.
And I immediately made a mental note. Okay, we're going to try this one more time, and then I'm going to pitch him the idea. I have no idea whether he's got time. I have no idea what we would do and how we would structure it, but I know that there was a hole, because I went looking for a Minecraft podcast, could not find one. Those that I did find were 5 years old and used a lot of adult language, and I thought, that's not the audience for this game. At least that's not what my impression was. And so later that summer, I pitched it, and I want to say it only took us a couple of months before we launched it in August, right?
Yeah. From my perspective, I got tagged in a Twitter post while I was in Southern California helping my partner celebrate their grandmother's 90th birthday. And I got tagged in the Citadel Cafe Twitter post where you'd said, I've been really into watching Pixel Riffs play Minecraft. And I listened to this and thought, a podcast I could be on, because I've loved podcasts for a few years at that point, but hadn't really found the opportunity to either be on one or start one myself. I didn't know much about the business side of things. And so along comes a guy who's already running several podcasts and wants to start another one. So I thought, yeah, sure, like I'll hop on that particular expertise, and I can bring a little bit more of the immersion in Minecraft. And then naturally, as the podcast took off, it coincided with the rise of Survival Guide. So I was becoming a full-time Minecraft YouTuber at the same time that this podcast was in the process of launching, and it all really started with the Update Aquatic. I think our first episode is called We Love Bubbles because of the Update Aquatic being like the main update that just come out. So it was good timing all round, because that was also a time when everybody seemed to be getting back into Minecraft if they'd been on hiatus since like playing it in beta or whatever. So things really fell together for us pretty quickly after that.
I think I misspoke. I think I said 2017, but it was 2018. Because that was the first episode was August 10th, 2018. I must have been playing Minecraft for a little bit longer than I thought before I decided to pull the trigger on a podcast.
Yeah.
Because the summer that I thought we had started the show, I was in Utah for vacation, so that wouldn't have been the same time. I think that sums it up. I don't know if I knew that side of the story, that you had always wanted to be on a podcast as well.
Yeah, I got interested in stuff, and when I get interested in stuff, I want to help make it in some way. Like, there's a few podcasts I listen to now that I've like genuinely said, if you want to do some like listener submitted stuff, if I can help you with production on this or this or this, like I don't really have the time to do it, but I want to help out. And it was an opportunity to talk about Minecraft even more than I already did, which is probably a relief for the other people in my life who don't have to hear me talk about Minecraft as much now, because I do it on a recorded medium that can be sent out to everybody's podcatchers. We'll move on to Scooter92's question, because it's similarly related. What other names did you consider for the podcast when you first created it? And I think our early names were informed by the success of my One Chunk tutorial series, which was the most successful thing I'd done on my YouTube channel at the time. And so they were all sort of like the One Chunk podcast and like One More Chunk and things like that, right? You pulled out the show notes from our like brainstorming session to go through a few more of those.
Yeah, it's one of the nice things about being a digital pack rat is that I still have all that stuff somewhere in our drive folders. And I found like the different names: One Chunk Podcast, One More Chunk, Lucky Chunk Podcast. And then Spawn Chunks was in there, which I think I had become aware of just in learning about the game. And just it sounded like a really good kind of origin for anything. And so I think that's why it stuck. But I also remember wanting to avoid Minecraft or Minecast or anything similar, like Minecraft Pod or like any of that kind of stuff, because there's so many podcasts out there that have those names that are like low effort, and they've always got like 7 episodes from 6 years ago and they just disappear because it's just it doesn't feel like a full thought before people just start putting together the show. And so because of my past experience, I wanted to kind of differentiate what we were doing. And it helped too that with 2 of us involved, we had, you know, a way to bounce the names off one another, but then also we didn't need to put either one of our names on it because it was like a 50-50 partnership. So we could just come up with something entirely new. Yeah. And something that would speak to the audience. And I also think that the Spawn Chunks was pretty well known in terms of Minecraft language. So if you saw something called the Spawn Chunks, you would assume it would be Minecraft related. Spawn is in all kinds of different video games, especially like first person shooters that are arena shooters, that kind of thing. But the chunk part, I think, is very specific to Minecraft, at least in video game vernacular. Yeah. And so I think that's why we went with it, is because it was so specific to Minecraft.
Yeah, that, and because the Spawn Chunks is like your home on a server a lot of the time, or it's like the most familiar place. It's the place where you spawn in for the first time, and so like it felt like people were embarking on a journey with us when we launched the show, and it was like, this is where we start out. Let's see where we can build things from here. So yeah, we're not planning any spin-offs that are called like, you know, the Farlands or anything like that, but there's certainly some mileage to be gotten out of Minecraft terminology that doesn't seem so obviously Minecraft. Naming the podcast, we kind of likened it to naming a Minecraft server where all the good names were taken several years ago, and what we're left to deal with is like whatever feels current or whatever feels like it can be divergent enough from Minecraft that it's not super obvious, but you put the Spawn Chunks, a Minecraft podcast, on social media so people really know what they're getting into.
Yeah. Isaac wants to know, what tips do you have for starting your own podcast? I will just dive in right here with a couple of quick ones. Practice with friends, record it without the intention of publishing it to like the wide internet. You know, share it with friends, get feedback from people that you trust, get comfortable having yourself recorded. You can learn to edit kind of stuff at the same time. If you get past that and you know that you want to start, you know, doing something a little bit more public, I would say podcast about something that you can see yourself talking about for a very long time. Something Johnny mentioned just a few minutes ago about, you know, sparing his family and friends the amount of time he wanted to talk about Minecraft. Well, it's the same with, for me, you know, on the Citadel Cafe, sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. Like there's lots of friends that are just like their eyes glaze over, and I'm just like, okay, so I'll talk about that on the show, you know, because they might not have watched the latest Star Wars cartoon like I have. And I would say, kicking off, we're in a world online where there's just so much access to learning how to do things, whether it's software or learning how to get into some audio. Invest some time and some energy, and even if it's just a little bit of money, to go beyond your basic kind of audio headset. Like, don't podcast with, these are just my earphones. This microphone is not what's happening. Don't use these. Use something that's just a little bit more when you get to the point where you're publishing it, because nothing will make me bail on a new podcast faster than really crappy audio. And that doesn't have to be a lot of money. Some of the biggest podcasters right now use headsets mics because they like to travel. And I don't know how expensive they are, but there's only so much you can spend on a little headset mic. And if it works, it works. The trick is knowing how to make it sound as good as possible, and so that the audience perceives that effort. And then I would say listen to other podcasts that you like, you know, and emulate. I mean, a lot of our rundown, a lot of the way that we structure the show, I have unabashedly stolen from the way that Tom Merritt and his crew run Daily Tech News Show, because I've been a fan of his work for a very long time and know how they do the rundowns, and it just makes sense. They do a news show. We essentially do kind of like a news and editorial show about Minecraft. So running it down in that way and that structure has really helped. I did not come up with it on my own. I've begged, borrowed, and stolen ideas from all kinds of different podcasts that I listen to, including this 300 Q&A episode. Like, this was an idea from another show. I think Modern Wisdom does it.
Yeah, and when we started like hashing out the show notes formats and stuff like that, you already had the experience of having done that from the Citadel Cafe. So it just kind of,
Yeah.
the more you do this, the more you pick up ideas that you're like, great, I'll move that onto the next project, whatever that happens to be. So yeah, keep those ideas. Become a digital pack rat because it will help you in the long run. Brendan has a more technical question. What equipment do you use to record and edit the podcast? I'll go first. As you can see on the screen, if you're watching this on YouTube, I have a Shure SM7B microphone that I use for all of my stuff, streaming and video and everything. This is plugged into a Behringer mixer that I've been using since my university days. So this is an XLR microphone. I don't think you need an XLR microphone. People just are familiar with it as a technology and sometimes have the equipment to support that. There are a lot of audio interfaces that have XLR that you can just like plug in, and it's as simple as using a USB interface after that. But we record into OBS. Joel also records his audio using Audio Hijack, just because that's what's familiar from podcasting workflow. I edit it in Adobe Premiere Pro, because even though that's a video editing software, we now have a video component, and I'm also used to the workspace. So it's a lot easier for me to get stuff done in Premiere because I know where all the tools are. I use them every day for YouTube stuff anyway. So that's really it as far as the podcast equipment goes, that and a good internet connection.
For me, I'm on a Yeti, which is the mic that you see in front of me, and it's 10 plus years old, and it served me very, very well. I think at the time it was under $150. I think I got it on sale. I think regular, they're quite affordable now. I have a new Yeti X that I have for streaming, which you can probably see behind me somewhere. Yeah, there it is there. And so that way I don't have to move the mic back and forth between the two machines, but I did that for a very long time before I just decided to drop the money and get the new mic. As far as software goes, I use an Audio Hijack program on Mac from Rogue Amoeba, and that allows me to record multiple tracks. We'll be switching to OBS, obviously, for the video feed here for the Spun Chunks. I believe Johnny is also going to be using the audio from that. I'll be just doing some work behind the scenes to get the audio from OBS up to the same kind of caliber that I get from Audio Hijack. But I use Audio Hijack to record the Citadel Cafe because it allows me to have myself, the guest, and also a backup track all recorded at the same time. So if I need to increase their volume or cut them out or do something, it doesn't affect my audio. And if anything bad happens, like my mic died or their mic died or something, then I've got a Discord recording that I can just, it's a pain to edit because we'd both be on the same track, but it's really nice to have those redundancies in the background. And as far as video, for me, I'm on a 2017 iMac. And so I'm using the iMac camera right now. As we progress with the video podcast, I might invest in something newer. I was looking at webcams, but I'm on the fence as to whether I want to go webcam or whether I want to go with something like a mirrorless camera. I do have one of those, which is what I use for my Lego stream. It's just out of shot behind me over there. It is a Sony A6100, and that has a dummy battery pack, so it's plugged into the wall. And I use a Camlink 4K from Elgato to get the feed into the machine. So, and I was using that or something similar when I was doing art streams. It was like a webcam hovering above my desk, and I used USB plug and play for the longest time. It was only a secondhand, I didn't invest in new, just a secondhand Sony camera. After doing a lot of research online, that's where I decided to improve the video for the stuff that I was doing with the Lego.
Yeah. For the record, my camera is a Panasonic Lumix that I bought specifically because I wanted really good quality for my streaming video. I used a Logitech C920, whatever the standard Logitech webcam that everybody has is. I'd had that for a while and just wanted to upgrade to something that I could, change lenses and have like a slightly higher quality setup here. So yeah, that was like a pretty solid investment. A little bit overkill for the podcast, but luckily I use it for everything else too.
Grandpa Crafter, a community miner in our community. I was curious to know what else you each do in order to prepare for episodes of the Spawn Chunks, such as sites you use for research or to check for news, newsletters to which you've subscribed, folks you follow for news, and so on, as well as your personal routines for preparing. Brendan also asked about the podcast planning process. We touched a little bit on the notes. The notes is something that I brought over from the Citadel Cafe. It's a Google Docs document that we have a template for that we just make a copy of every week and then fill it in with the pertinent information. There is the introduction section, the quick login, news section, followed by email, and then the main discussion. And of course, we have written down all of our plugs and social medias, our thanks to patrons, all that kind of stuff. And we update those weekly. Like if a new patron comes on at a certain level that needs a shout out, then we do that. And that then just gets saved in the template so that we don't have to remember it to do it every week. So that saves a lot of work on the back end. For me, I really don't have any newsletters. I just honestly, after we got going, rely on our Discord, because as soon as the snapshot is available, there's a link in the Discord. And I have not found the new design of Minecraft.net to be all that friendly. So it's a lot faster to go to the Discord than it is to go to Minecraft.net and search for the thing that you're looking for. However, I also find that the Minecraft YouTube and Instagram feeds have become a lot better in terms of communicating, hey, there's a new thing. The Netflix announcement is something that I caught on, I think it was either TikTok or Instagram, and then went looking and found the video on YouTube that we'll have in our show notes this week. So that's where I get a lot of stuff as far as the news goes. And then as far as stuff I watch, it's mostly, I want to say, Exumavoid's breakdown of the snapshots. I find that Exuma does such a good job of taking the giant, news read of the patch notes and dumbing it down into, I shouldn't say dumbing it down, simplifying it into real world terms, how it affects players. And we'll go into some technical stuff, which is good because between him and his community, I'll learn a little bit more about like what those lists of changes to tables or predicates and stuff will actually mean and how it might affect gameplay. I feel like they do a pretty good job of picking out the important stuff, and that's essentially the media that I consume to get ready. I tend to do a little bit of prep Sunday night, so I don't have to get up super early to prep Monday morning because it's 10 a.m. is record time for me. But I find that over the last nearly 6 years, if something happens and I just get up at 8 and I'm in my chair by 8:30, I can prep for the show in an hour and a half. It doesn't, it depends on what we're doing. If it's an email heavy show, then easy because the conversation's pretty much done. If it's snapshot season, then the news writes itself. So it's just a matter of, I think, depending on who's hosting, because we kind of switch host duties week to week. The person that's hosting is usually the person that's writing the news because they have to read it.
Yeah.
And so depending on whose week it is, I have to, you have to spend a little bit more time taking the notes from the snapshot post on Minecraft.net and make it something that you can read out loud, because they're often in point form, and sometimes the sentence structure makes sense when you read it quickly on a website, but when you have to read it into a microphone, it is not the easiest thing.
It's a lot of shorthand and abbreviations and stuff that makes sense if you've been reading and writing these for however long, but yeah, for us, we do have to pass that into a thing that makes sense when you say it out loud. But my prep is pretty much the same as Joel's. Like sometimes it'll be Monday morning because that's 4 hours offset for me, so I have a lot more time on Monday to prepare for a 2 p.m. show. But yeah, a lot of the time, if there's stuff happening throughout the week, I'll kind of make a note of it. We'll pop a link in the show notes to be like, expand on this later when it's newsread stuff. And more often than not, we put a link into snapshots and stuff throughout the week as they pop up. But yeah, like aside from that, just making sure I know what's going on, making sure that we've got something to discuss in the main discussion, and a cup of tea and a glass of water, and I'm good to go, really. Jack asks, what are your criteria for choosing chunk mail to read on the show? So chunk mail is usually the third segment of the main show after our introduction and the news. We always love to read mail from the community, as you can tell from the fact that we're reading a ton of it for this episode. But yeah, chunk mail is one of those things that we try and whittle down to relevant topics, to stuff that's like currently in the conversation Minecraft community-wise, or anything that feels current in Minecraft but is bringing up something new that we maybe haven't discussed on the show. I think some of them even get spun out into longer main discussions if we don't have anything notable from our own Minecraft lives that we want to talk about on a larger kind of discussion. So yeah, chunk mail is one of those vital things that can just be like a couple of quick emails before we get into the meat of whatever we're talking about. But if there's not a new update or some dramatic changes in snapshots, then a lot of the time our community really comes through with stuff for us to talk about in the main show.
Yeah, once you get past the rainbow email sheep of doom who filters everything, then it's all categorized. So there are folders, or I guess labels, for regular chunk mail from patrons, chunk mail dispenser emails, which are usually shorter, and then again those from patrons. And then there's another category that actually is recent where we say, oh, actually, no, that's a really good idea, and that could be spun out into a main discussion. And that's something that we started doing where we have those lighter weeks where it's like pre-releases or a brand new version of Minecraft has just come out, and because we've been talking about the snapshots for weeks, we don't really have a main discussion because we all know the crafter, like, so it's not like we're going to do a discussion about the crafter when it comes out. And so those emails kind of stick in backup. So if you've messaged the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com and your email isn't read in the first week or two, it's not the end of the world. Like, it could just be in the buffer as to when is the appropriate time, when is it going to be in context. I will say that I tend to give preference to the moderate length to short, 150 words or less usually. If they're novellas, it just becomes really difficult to fit it all into the show, and also it's a lot of work to then edit that down into like, what do I cut, what was important, because it's better for you to edit your emails than myself, because I will be more liberal with that stuff.
Yeah, and it's always really nice to get an email that says, oh, I've been listening to the show for X amount of time and like really enjoy it. I listen to it on my commute. It helps me understand what's going on in Minecraft. But a lot of the time we will cut those elements out for time. We do read and appreciate them, but sometimes we just 100%. Want to get to what the discussion is, right?
JOEO8 continues, which a lot of numbers in that username. At the end of the emails on the podcast, there is the player died of this sort of thing. Which is the closing line to almost all of our emails now. Do you make that up, or is that in the email? That is 100% the people that wrote in. I believe somebody somewhere started it as a bit of a joke just to make Johnny and I laugh, and it worked, and it stuck. And it is a community-created meme within the Spawn Chunks that I adore, because some of them are hilarious.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like a thing where people try to come up with a creative or funny or unique to them way. Very often they'll reference the thing that they were talking about in the email. Like if you get an email about the Deep Dark, then they often die to the warden, that kind of thing in their closing sentence. But I do find it very, very funny.
I'm not sure if it was around the time I did the Survival Guide episode all about all the different death messages, and we might have chatted about it on the show, about how Minecraft has a lot of bizarre death messages, like stepping on magma blocks and, taking fatal damage from that says you walked into the danger zone and things. And so, like, I think the creativity comes from within Minecraft itself and everyone being quite familiar with that as a format, but it's a fun way to sign off. Because at that point, like, you've signed out from your email, your presence is no longer there. It's as though you just took a death in Minecraft and needed to respawn somewhere else. So yeah, it just became a thing that the community started doing, and everybody who's written in seems to catch on to that. Like, we rarely get an email now that doesn't have some kind of witty, creative sign-off to it. So it's a sign that our community really knows what the tone is of this podcast, which I feel is a really delightful thing. Next question comes in from Kai, who says, with your recent addition of video podcasts on YouTube, would you ever consider doing video podcasts on Spotify or other platforms that support it? I'll throw it to you, Joel, because you tend to handle a lot of the posting and the back-end sort of management of the podcast going out to people's feeds. So is Spotify going to be an option for us?
I believe so, yeah. I've only just recently started looking into it, but once we have the video up on YouTube, then we'll be able to use that content and repurpose it. I think I mentioned earlier today that, we can use it for YouTube Shorts by just restacking the video. Anything that's made for YouTube Short can then just be quickly repurposed for Instagram Reels or on TikTok. We do have a TikTok account, and we have an Instagram account that we use regularly. TikTok, we haven't posted anything yet because I've been waiting for the 300th episode to put clips from this show out, which I think could be really fun because it'll be a little bit more accessible because it's not all about Minecraft. So I think that could be a fun way to get some new listeners. But Spotify, yeah, it's a quick upload link that's in our Spotify backend. So I'm not a Spotify user. I tend to listen to podcasts on Downcast or watch them on YouTube if they have a video component. So I have to do some more work to familiarize myself with the backend, but it seems like it's pretty straightforward and a very quick, low data point survey of where people listen to the podcast. It was pretty much split three ways between Apple, YouTube, and Spotify. So we're not going to be ignoring the Spotify stuff. There's Spotify comments and things as well, and I do review those and publish those and try to be engaged with not the questions, but like the comments that people have, the responses to the episodes that people have. So we're definitely on Spotify. So if you're a Spotify listener, you can look for potentially viewing that as well in the future. I didn't want to skip over this one. I think we might have missed it just out of the complexity of this spreadsheet. But Jack wants to know, how do you come up with the joke at the very end of each episode? And this is for you, Johnny, because you're the one that writes those.
Yeah, it's usually just a reference to the main topic of the show, or anything newsworthy that popped up. It's sometimes prepared beforehand. Like most of the time, I will write it ahead of the show actually starting recording. Sometimes, very rarely, I come up with one mid-episode, and I either try and mute myself to type one out quickly, or I will just kind of improv one at the end, which I've only done once or twice because my improv skills are not that sharp. But I've had moments where I just think, yeah, I've got an absolute banger for this final outro line, and then there are some days when I would forget about it down to the wire. So we now have on our template a message right at the top of the show notes that says, Johnny, don't forget to write the closing line. So it is more likely than you think that I would miss out on that, but we've done 299 episodes before this, and each of them has had a mostly unique closing line. I want to give a quick shout out to the folks in our Discord who have managed to maintain a spreadsheet of the sign-offs from, I think, every episode. Last I checked that spreadsheet, it was very comprehensive and had additional notes like this was reused in episode 291 or whatever. So there's nice. some people in the community who are very enthusiastic about that, and that makes me very happy. We'll move on to Lauren, who asks, do you have team meetings with your content engineer patrons? If so, how often?
We don't really have any official meetings with just the content engineers. I think the closest thing would be the quarterly hangouts that we have, and that's available for all of our patrons at any level to listen and participate, ask questions in the live chat when we do those. If you're not familiar, that is a podcast all about the podcast behind the scenes, the download numbers, the YouTube metrics, plans for the future, all that kind of stuff. And we also field questions from our patrons about stuff like this. And so if you're interested, then that might be something to check out. But as far as meetings, not really, nothing official. The ore producers and content engineer patron levels have access to the Smeltery, which is just a chat room in the Discord that has myself, Johnny, those two, as well as the moderators in there. And we don't use it super often. It does happen from time to time, especially if we have something like a moderation issue, but we also want to bring in some people that are part of the community as well. And so it's nice to have the ore producers and the content engineers there to kind of bounce off a small segment of the community in case we're trying to test something or get some feedback about something that we might not want everybody to chime in and all at once. But that hasn't happened very much. I find a lot of the time when we're communicating with our patrons, it's all of them at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We don't tend to keep too much back for the Smeltery chat because there isn't really much changing behind the scenes at the podcast all that often, right? But it used to be the case that they'd have a little bit more input. We used to run roundtable topics by them occasionally and stuff like that. But then as we rolled on to doing the show week to week, we sort of used up our reserves of topics to the point where more often than not, we're just talking about whatever's topical that week. And nobody's complained as far as I can tell. Nobody has come to us saying, I don't think I'm getting value for money on the content engineer patronship. I think a lot of it is just about having the financial generosity to support us at that level and being happy with that as an experience. But yeah, we don't have super regular meetings with everybody because I think a lot of the time there wouldn't be a great deal for people to say. Everyone seems pretty happy with how things are going behind the scenes.
And I think the names of those roles, like ore producer, content engineer, it's strictly just to have a fun, quippy name that sounds like podcast related, Minecraft related, or both at the same time. And that's so they don't necessarily describe what is entailed in the Patreon level. It's just they're just fun names for that kind of stuff. Marcel asks, how do you decide who to have as a guest? And do you contact them or do they contact you? The fun answer to that, it's a bit of both, actually, which has been something that I've been very tickled about the recent guests that we've had on the show. Some of them have approached us, which is incredibly flattering when you're doing a show about Minecraft and people that make the game are listening and either say, hey, can I come on the show and talk about this? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, you can. But other times we have also reached out. I know that through our connections, we reached out to other content creators, friends or people that we've played with, or Johnny, you've played with from time to time. As far as what we look for a good fit for the conversation. and the style of the show and personality, in addition to relative to the current community conversations and the meta. So if there's nothing really going on in Redstone, then we may not be having a Redstone person that's their main focus on the show right at that minute. Whereas if there is some news around Redstone, that's more than likely the time we're going to try to grab someone like that. And likewise for the different aspects of the game that are kind of in the current meta, we try to find people that will spice that up. Not that we're opposed to just bringing in something out of left field, but it sometimes works out very well. I think a recent example would be Archaeoplays with archaeology coming to the game. Perfect pairing. Had no idea we had a real archaeologist in our community until bam, it just kind of landed in front of us, and we're like, oh, that's an opportunity we can't pass up, and so we had them on the show.
Yeah, and it's great when we have people with specific expertise. Those are the kind of guests that I really love, is when someone's got a really niche way of playing Minecraft, or they have expertise in a real life thing that is being implemented in Minecraft, in the case of Archaeoplays. Having Mog Swamp on to talk about Superflat recently was really fun. Having James from Loading Ready Run on to talk about punching chunks and like just playing Minecraft in a fairly eccentric way to the casual Minecraft survival player. I think guests like that are always going to bring some interesting take on Minecraft that we won't have considered, when Joel and I are obviously fans of folks like Hermitcraft and the kind of more popular survival content creators who would be great guests on the show just because they have broad appeal and are popular names. They'll show up in Google search results, people will know who they are. But at the same time, we don't want to just run through the entire Hermitcraft player list and get them all on because we know they're popular. That sort of feels like we're turning into a Hermitcraft fan cast at that stage, and that's not really what we want. We want to be a podcast about the broader Minecraft community. And so there's still a few gaps we want to fill here and there. There are still a few people that I'd love to talk to about their specific expertise in the show, but that's also something we go into a lot when we do our quarterly hangouts. So stay tuned for those if you're a patron, and you'll be able to hear some of our future ideas for guests. In the meantime, Cold-Blooded Lords asks, do you read the Apple Podcasts reviews? Joel, you're more in the back end of things than I am when it comes to the Apple Podcasts platform. I read the ones that you've shared with me and that a couple of our patrons, I think, have sent occasionally over just to kind of highlight a review that they thought was particularly sweet. Do any stand out to you, or how frequently do you end up reading those?
Well, we get an email from chartable.com, which is how I track the numbers for Apple. And really a lot of the other podcasts will say regions, because they'll give us UK, Canada, US, that kind of stuff. And I have included in that email, I think I get the most recent or the most recent top rated review, although I've seen some reviews that are not nice. So I think they just include the most recent. And so I read them and I forward that email on to Johnny every week. And I don't go to Apple Podcasts specifically seeking out like multiple reviews, but it has been nice to see some of the more glowing and kind reviews lately that have been in there. The other thing that we do read is the Spotify comments. So there's a prompt at the end of every Spotify version of the podcast that says, like, what did you think of the episode? And so it's not just like, do you like the podcast? It's what did you think of this specific episode? And so those get held for review for spam reasons. And then I approve the ones that make sense, where they actually answered the question. Like, oh, I really thought it was interesting when you were talking about leashes and boats. Like, I'm so glad that that's coming to, to Java, which could be like an example of something that might happen this week. So when those things happen, I just click publish. And so you can go on Spotify and see the published responses to the podcast there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I need to check in with that side of things a little bit more often. It's super fun to see what people think of the show, and I can weed out the bad stuff. I've been doing that with YouTube comments for a while.
I'm about to say, yeah, you got more practice with that than I do, and honestly, like any kind of low review we have, it's honestly just spam. It's never has any real content or context, because like,
there's always going to be trolls, Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Blast Jordan 563 asks, what skills have you developed / improved during the making of the Spawn Chunks podcast? As much as this is a bit of an ironic answer, I'll say sight reading, the email and the news, as well as the big one for me, I think, is interview skills, multi-person podcast hosting, especially when we have someone from Mojang on the show, which is a little nerve wracking because they're part of the team that makes the game that we are talking about every week, and I want to make a good impression. You want to make sure that the person that's being interviewed has a chance to speak, and thankfully, the people we have on the show are often just as passionate about Minecraft as we are. So the best feeling in the world after an interview is feeling like you didn't say much on the podcast. And that's great. Like if you can ask a thoughtful enough question that the guest is just off to the races for 5 minutes, then I feel really good about that. But that's not something I had a lot of practice with as far as just like a smaller, more focused crew. I did the Comics Coast to Coast podcast for a while, but there was 3 hosts and 1 guest. So we had only had to worry about a couple of questions each. Whereas with you and I interviewing somebody, it tends to be a lot more conversational and a lot more back and forth. And the challenging part there is to make sure that the guest feels comfortable to also chime in and jump in and not feel like they have to wait to be spoken to before they can contribute. And so I found that challenging, but also rewarding.
Whenever we're prepping a guest, we basically say, interrupt us, because we talk on this show every week, and people are so tired of our voices at this point, jokingly, that, they want to hear you. So if you want to, treat this like we're all just kind of having a coffee, and, if you want to just chime in at any point, we say, feel free to interrupt us. But yeah, I'd agree with all of the above. I think it's been fun learning to interview people, which is not something I've ever really done before this. Even at work stuff, I'd never been in a high enough level in any kind of organization I've worked for that I had to interview somebody, or never worked for a school newspaper or whatever even. So it's been fun learning to do stuff like that for sure. Moving on into the content creation category, we'll kick off with Brody the Beast, who asks, what recommendations would you give me as a new content creator?
I'm going to defer to you because I think you've got more experience, especially on YouTube, than I do. Yeah. And I think a lot of people that ask this question are coming from a YouTube kind of mindset.
Yeah, I say the same thing on YouTube and Twitch all the time. My usual advice is to make the type of videos you want to watch, because that way you can basically guarantee that you would be part of the audience for them, so there must be other people out there like you. I started making Minecraft Let's Play videos because that's what I watched, and then I started making Minecraft tutorial videos because those were the ones I watched in order to put new cool stuff into my Let's Play, and so it just kind of snowballs from there. The minute you want to get involved with something is the minute you should start trying to figure out how you can get involved with it or how you can do it yourself. Because if you're interested, other people will be interested too.
I will say ditto, but then also add in anything that I said earlier about getting into podcasting. Practice on your own, do some things on your own. Don't feel like you have to put it out there right away if you're worried about learning and audio and video quality content. And if you're not someone that has those skills right away, streaming on Twitch has a low bar to technical entry. You don't have to worry about editing afterwards. It is live, so there's that kind of performance aspect to it, but there's a lot less admin and after the fact stuff that you have to learn how to do. And I mean, I put my VODs on YouTube. I don't edit them at all. It's just an archive at Joel Duggan VODs. So if you want to start with the YouTube presence there, you can try that. But I would definitely say that the focusing on the type of videos that you want to watch as the kind of that you want to make is solid advice.
Yeah, I find that that's my answer, usually because it's different to the answers you will hear elsewhere. Also, focus on audio quality where you can, because audio quality trumps 100%. Video quality every time. We're not just saying that as podcasters. Honestly, I started recording stuff on a computer that could barely make 480p videos, and sometimes the frame rate was kind of wonky, and a lot of the time people don't care, because if they are watching a video, they're more likely half watching it on a second monitor while they're doing stuff in Minecraft themselves, and the audio quality is the thing that matters. So if you can get good equipment, that's what you want to invest in first, and then after that, a lot of software is free, so you'll probably have an easy enough time downloading OBS or something like that and just getting straight to it.
The Nookie, an ore producer in our community, wanted to know, what advice can you give someone who is thinking about or just starting out the journey of content creation in a field saturated as Minecraft? So they want to play Minecraft as a content creator, but they're feeling there's just so many Minecrafters out there already. It's overwhelming. It kind of feels like, well, what's the point? How would you stand out? For me, I think the key is actually the same as what you perceive as the problem. Minecraft is a unique game that you as a content creator bring yourself to the game as much as anybody else does. Unlike something more rigid like a MOBA or an FPS, or another game that has like a storyline that you have to follow, it's daunting because of the number of people that play Minecraft. But similar to Johnny's advice about making the kind of videos you want to watch, doing the kind of things in Minecraft that interest you is meaning that it's going to be completely unique to you, or at least for the most part. And if you can find something that's even more special, we mentioned Punch a Chunk earlier. Like, that's just such a unique thing, and it gets a lot of attention because it's just not something that a lot of people are doing. So if you can find something that you're interested in that maybe not everyone is doing that you can do well, then lean into that. And I think too that because of the saturation of Minecraft in the content creation market, that doing something that is unique to you will also keep you more interested.
Definitely. Do it for fun, and don't focus on audience numbers or making a profit. Just focus on sharing the stuff you're passionate about, and that will take you a long, long way. If you're in Minecraft, setting a reasonable goal for yourself, like you want to build a town or something like that, and then that takes you on a unique journey that isn't dictated by, well, I want to do all of this stuff that I saw on Hermitcraft, or I saw in Pixelrus videos, or whatever else. Like, I think if you can tailor it to your own passions, I think that'll take you a long way to standing out amongst a crowd of Minecraft people. Keelion entered this question. If you could go back in time to when you first started your Minecraft streaming and YouTube creations, what advice would you give to your younger self? We'll put younger in inverted commas here because, yes, I was 27 and I'm now 37, but I still felt old to be getting into Minecraft at the time.
Pot kettle.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hear you. Keelion is an ore producer in our community as well, just so we don't forget that.
Mm-hmm.
The perfectionist nature of your art, Joel, will cost you 10 times the time in Minecraft that it did drawing anything that you thought took a long time. It's going to take a lot longer to do that in Minecraft, so approach it with that mindset. I do remember getting frustrated early on when builds that were, now that I look at them, not that big and not that intense, taking way longer than I wanted them to. But a lot of that had to do with being early game, not having Elytra. Like, there's a bunch of things that really slowed down the process. But definitely just kind of not be in a rush to get to the finish line. It's not about finishing the project. It's about the process. It's about the story along the way. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's something that I definitely was impatient about, which is weird because I'm usually a pretty patient person. And then from the technical side of things, I would say get into live streaming sooner. I try to do what everybody else was doing as far as I knew, which was edited YouTube content. Trying to balance that with art career, other podcasting. I just, like, the amount of time that I had to try and sit in a chair and edit stuff, try to like do takes, record segments. I found my experience just greatly improved when I get into live streaming, and decided to just not even go down the edited YouTube route, which actually, is something to the lines of the question, is that I kind of felt like there was just so many people on YouTube doing edited content. I was like, it's just such an uphill battle. I'll do stuff live on stream because my strength with kind of live to hard drive podcast recording meant that I could probably do that a little bit easier. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of where I went. So I would go into streaming sooner, and I would just try to leave the perfectionist at the door. It's about learning, and when you're learning, your viewers are learning too, and I think that's a really valid thing too.
Yeah. For me, in-game experience, I would say technical Minecraft is much less intimidating once you stop reading about it and start trying it. I feel like I was intimidated by redstone and anything technical for a really long time, and now I have a much more solid foundation of knowledge in that, and it's because I stopped worrying about whether or not I was doing stuff correctly or in like a compact way, or all of the stuff that the redstone community really values of a finished product, and started approaching it as, get messy with it first and get your hands dirty, and then figure out how you can refine this and treat it like an iterative process. And I was reading about redstone on the Minecraft wiki and not really understanding it, when really what I should be doing was hopping into a creative test world and just messing around with a comparator until I figured out what it did. The other thing I would say is, from a more meta perspective, people are searching for tutorials, and if you don't make them, who will? So that's another great thing. But honestly, I'm really happy with the progress that I made, and like I wouldn't even want to give myself the advice that it's actually all going to work out if you keep doing this, because I think that would make me complacent, and then I would want to do it less because I would know that things were going to work out. So keep me hungry, and I'm going to try and deliver a lot harder than I would have otherwise.
Next email comes from Farmer Man. How many subscribers and or viewers do you need to make YouTube a full-time job? This is going to be one of those less romantic answers. For me, from a business perspective, it depends on your expenses. Like it's very different for someone to have to support, a family that might have kids, a dog, a house, a car, versus someone that just has an apartment and a budgie, in a cage. A good exercise is to treat it like a business if you're really serious about it, and run the numbers, have a budget, see what that's going to entail. I do think that, you should focus on the fun, as Johnny mentioned, and the rest of it will come together. But it's good to kind of have this in the back of your mind. If it is a goal, like if this is something that you really would like to pursue, then I think that knowing what your goal is going to be really important, because it's going to be different than every other person's goal. And comparison is the thief of joy. So if you're trying to go for 1 million subs, that's a mile away on YouTube. And that maybe isn't what you need, because I think the stat is like 2 to 5% of your audience will support you directly in one way or another financially. So you just have to grow that audience. But if you find that your audience support is at more at a 10% level, then you don't need giant numbers and giant views. You've just happened to found a niche of generous people to help support. So it's very personal, but I think that running the numbers is a healthy thing to do.
Yeah, it also depends whether you're supplying your channel revenue through AdSense and the standard YouTube way of running ads on your videos, or if you have an audience that seems dedicated and wants to support you, at which point you open a Patreon campaign and the money comes directly from subscribers like that, and you don't have to worry about YouTube ad revenue fluctuating in terms of stability, which is how I started out. But I went full-time on YouTube after I hit about 100,000 subscribers, but at the time, my channel was still growing, and the reason I hit 100,000 was that a few months later I was going to be hitting 300,000, because the rise of the survival guide was just sort of meteoric at that time when the series was really taking off. I was getting higher than that in terms of view count, and that's the important thing to recognize, is that subscribers on YouTube are really a vanity metric. Views and watch time are what drive ad revenue. It's not subscribers. Like YouTube cares how many subscribers you have because it looks good on paper, but the subscribers as a number aren't paying the bills. It's how many people are watching adverts related to your videos. And so, yeah, that's the stuff that's really going to drive any kind of revenue coming directly from YouTube. Outside of that, you sort of got to figure it out yourself. So like Joel said, there's no solid answer. That was the threshold at which it was fine for me, but that was happening for me 5 years ago. So the financial fluctuation of the market also has to come into account there. Sometimes YouTube has an ad-pocalypse and suddenly people aren't making as much revenue as they were, and suddenly things have to be recalculated. So keep an eye on it, and basically allow yourself a bit of a buffer zone where you think, I'm not going to just immediately jump on full-time because I've had a little bit of success. Allow yourself to figure out whether or not it's viable long-term before you really go for it. Next up, Nursing Geek asks, as someone who's been wrestling with audio for both recording and streaming, I'm noticing that I have a distinct lack of knowledge about how audio tools work. What would your recommendations be for someone looking to get a better foundation in audio principles and move beyond plug and play? So I have a degree in music production from Leeds College of Music in the UK. I learned some of the technical and physics side of audio in my late teens and early 20s. But one of the other key things I learned, and this is a lesson that you can have for free, trusting your ears is the most important thing. It doesn't matter whether you recorded it on a $3,000 microphone or a $30 microphone. If it sounds good, then your audience is going to listen to it. And I'm pretty sure some fairly professional Minecraft folks like Etho was recording on a $30 Sony headset famously for years, and nobody minded because the stuff he was doing in game was really fun and engaging, and he's the godfather of Redstone and technical Minecraft and all that stuff, right? So I think individually it doesn't matter all that much. Individual skills and understanding software is like a separate category. Like if you want to know how to set up OBS to make sure that you're getting the best audio quality for your streaming bandwidth and stuff like that, there are tutorials online. You can find those. But in terms of, you know, plugging a microphone in, as long as it's getting some input, as long as you know where your Windows audio mixer is so you can set a reasonable volume level, record yourself, listen back to it, and decide what needs to change, and trust your ears throughout that whole process.
I don't know if there's a rush or a perceived rush to get beyond plug and play, but I'm still using plug and play. You know,
Yeah.
and I've been at this professionally now for quite a while, and it's accessible. There's less to fail. There's less things to go wrong. Technically, we've all had days where, you know, the things that you have in your tech, I guess, repertoire just decide to not work
Yeah.
for no reason. I will, however, recommend Tom Buck, Buck, on YouTube for gear and gear explanations, because he will go up against like the stuff that he uses as a professional videographer and a professional YouTuber, but also say like, hey, look, I'm going to compare this to this $50 USB microphone and see how it stands up. Now, ultimately, the conclusion might be that the more expensive gear is better. But if you're just starting out, you know, he might decide, well, you don't need it. Like, you can make this sound just as good with just a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of research. So I think it's worth checking out all of your options.
Absolutely. Like, fully endorse that. And yeah, there are people making bedroom recording versions of professionally produced like music tracks. Like I've watched a couple of channels recently. I think Audio Haze is the guy who was trying to do a Rage Against the Machine song with like bedroom recording equipment, and produced a pretty solid mix of a track that was professionally done in like the 90s. So you can do it now, and the plug and play stuff is so good now that you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a USB and an XLR microphone unless you were very, very sharp and knew a lot about microphones. So, you know, give it a try.
Oh, hello, Lola, a landscape artist member in our community, wants to know, what do you find to be the most personally fulfilling part of content creation? This is something for me that I equate to a lifetime being an artist and making stuff, and then moving away from doing that professionally and having other jobs, whether it's a part-time job somewhere or other professions or things that don't have me drawing very much, or design projects for like designing someone's website. It's a lot longer. It's not quite as creative. It takes longer to get out the door. I really like how fast I can do content creation. A stream is done in a couple of hours and posted on Twitch, and then just as long as it takes to download, it's on YouTube. And this podcast, with Johnny's help, we produce it in a day. For me, it starts at 10 a.m. and I'm usually publishing it around 4 or 5 p.m. One and done. And I get to walk away from the day going, we started off the day with nothing and we created a thing by the end of the day. And I love that. It's just so fun to put something new out into the world that we've created every single week, within the day. The fact that it doesn't bleed over into the next day, it's a really nice mind share. Like, it's a really nice process of just like beginning, middle, and end all in one day. I really enjoy that.
Yeah, I got into this to share stuff with other people. Like, my original like origin story for Minecraft was playing the Xbox version, and I didn't play with anybody else. So I wanted to share the stuff I was building with other people by making YouTube videos, and that's one of the reasons I switched to PC Minecraft. And so having essentially a huge group of friends with your specialized interest is very rewarding, because they'll understand it when you say, oh, I built a wither skeleton farm and it took me ages, but it's done. And everyone goes, yeah, congrats, enjoy your wither skeleton skulls now. And like that side of things is really rewarding. Minecraft is one of the world's biggest shared hobbies at this point, because it is the world's most popular video game. So you're going to be able to go anywhere and probably find some people who know what you're talking about.
Going into the Minecraft questions, Cyberspace, I believe that's how you pronounce that. How long have you guys been playing the game for, and how did you discover it? Quick math for me is 7 years, which I think I mentioned earlier today. My friend and current server mate on the Citadel, Stephen ESC, introduced me to the game. I was building a Lego set. I was complaining about how expensive Lego sets were at the time because I wanted more. And he said, you know, my boys and I are really into Minecraft. They were younger at the time. I think they were just barely into their teens. And he said, you should come and try it with us. So I bought the game, $30, whatever it was. And Steven had a family server. I joined him on the server. And then after the initial month or two of the free 3-month realm or whatever that promotion was at the time, I downloaded the world and continued it on my own. And I've been a player ever since. I think the following year is when I started the Citadel.
Yeah. For me, this is my 10th year. And I've actually passed the 10-year mark for starting an Xbox 360, which was April 2014. I moved to PC in November of that year, and I guess originally I knew of Minecraft, but I was introduced to it by a competitor research presentation that a colleague did when I worked for Disney Interactive, when I was email support for Club Penguin. And a lot of people were leaving Club Penguin saying like, oh, my son doesn't want the membership to this anymore, he plays Minecraft now. And going, oh, okay, Minecraft is like a significant force out there in the sort of younger market, what's the deal? And so he showed us a video of a guy building a 1-to-1 scale representation of the Starship Enterprise from Star Trek. And I went, okay, so this is more than just a survival game. Like, this is creative, and it's like, you know, there's a sandbox element to it. And so I started watching a couple of YouTube videos, started playing it on an Xbox that a friend of mine gave to me because he was getting an Xbox One, and it all went from there. Moon, who's a landscape artist member of our Discord, has the next question. What is your best Minecraft memory from around when you started playing Minecraft? In my case, on the Xbox 360 version, my first world was about 50% ocean. I built my first nether portal on a mushroom island because I had heard that no mobs spawned on mushroom islands, and I was convinced that a nether portal was just going to unleash horrors onto my world, worse than the skeletons and creepers that I was always already a little bit afraid of. For the record, again, I was 27, so I'd already developed those kind of odd Minecraft superstitions that people get. But then in that same world, because I wanted to set myself the goal of building a house at all 4 corners of the map, which is an 800 by 800-ish map on Xbox, they weren't big, I discovered that the 4th corner was underwater. So I did some research on the Minecraft wiki and discovered that you could build underwater if you filled up the space with blocks and then removed them all again to delete all of the water sources, and that was awesome. At that point, I just thought, this game is brilliant, they've thought of everything, all bets are off, most creative game, you know, award of the year 2024, hands down, you know? So I loved that voyage of discovery, a literal voyage, because it did take me across an ocean to find that there was no landmass in that corner.
That's awesome. The first time you can manipulate the game that way in a way that you did not expect. Because water in video games is always like, either you can swim across it or you can't, and that's just it. Like, you can't really interact with it much, especially back then. For me, it was that same first world. I think I called it Eternia, just kind of a bit of nostalgia for my childhood He-Man references, that I started with Steven ESC. But it was after I took it home on my own, after they decided to not have it on a server, and I just had it as a single-player world, and I decided to take on the Snake Mountain project and building something big. I let my art kind of creativity get into Minecraft and really kind of see what the game could do. And then something clicked with regards to the scale at which I could build it, what was required in terms of mining and gathering materials, the planning that was involved, Photoshop got involved, pixel art got involved, all that stuff kind of went into Snake Mountain. And that's when the game really clicked for me. That's when I realized, okay, this is more than just building something, because it was survival mode. I had to figure out all kinds of different techniques, because it was, I mean, several years ago, before I hadn't beaten the game at that point. So there was no elytra, there was no scaffolding, there was a bunch of dirt scaffolding. And you kind of had to have the patience to say, okay, well, this doesn't look very good with a bunch of dirt rings around it right now, but it will eventually when I remove it. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing was, the first time that I jumped out of the Snake Mountain's mouth down into the water pool below, and I had the same pit of stomach drop that happens on like a roller coaster, because I had a pretty big monitor at the time. And I was like, okay, if this pixel game can make me feel like I'm really traveling through space like that, then there's something to be said here. And that's kind of right. Those two things are really what got me hooked. When I was like, okay, I'm so into this that this like 8-bit or 16-bit graphic looking thing just made me feel like I was falling off of a cliff. There's something to this that I'm, previously was just not aware of. That's what got me hooked.
Yeah, I still get that. As somebody who is recently building something that almost hit build height, I have definitely experienced that feeling falling off of it several times.
I may or may not do it to my viewers on purpose, which is kind of fun. We've got the Prince Salami up next. Do you always try to play Minecraft at least once a day? And if so, why? I will start off and say absolutely not. I love Minecraft and I like playing Minecraft, and it's obviously part of my job. But I, like you mentioned earlier, I only play when I'm working. I don't have a downtime playing Minecraft. I have had times where I did play daily, whether it's like the launch of a new update, snapshots that I'm exploring, a project I'm trying to push and finish. But ultimately, life and responsibilities get in the way because Minecraft is not the only thing I do. I've got other podcasts. And at the time, when I first started, I had other art projects to do as well. But then also, I find that Minecraft, if I do it all the time, every day, becomes a chore.
Yeah.
It has some labor-intensive things. It has some grindy aspects to it. And if you're doing that every day, it becomes a chore. I found the same with World of Warcraft when I was really into World of Warcraft and I was doing daily quests. And it was just like, well, I'm doing them. Like, am I enjoying it? Or am I doing it out of habit and out of the need to have this done before the raid this weekend? And that's where I'm just like, I don't know how much fun this is, and am I prioritizing the right things, So I don't play every day.
Yeah, I don't either. Like I said earlier, I still plan on having Fridays off every week whenever possible. I think that only changes when, like in the case of Minecraft SOS, there's like a deadline coming up where a server will be closing and I need to get some stuff done. And even then, I try and plan better than that. But like you, I think if the easiest way to kill my enthusiasm for something is to make it an obligation. And like, even though this is a job, it's still a job that we are playing a video game, which is ostensibly a fun thing to do. So we should be having fun doing it. And if I'm not having fun, then that means I probably need to step away for a while, take a bit of a break, reassess, try and plan some stuff better so I'm using my time better. But you've got to have days off. For your own health and the sanity of those around you, it is absolutely something you should do. Even if you're somebody who plays Minecraft as a career. A while ago, people were sharing those Xbox stats for like how long they've spent in Minecraft, and I was actually kind of secretly pleased to discover that I don't play Minecraft nearly as much as some of my peers in this space, like overachievers, like Mythical Sausage, who will not mind me calling him that. But and again, I know it's kind of ridiculous to say that when like I have this massive project that I've just finished on Minecraft SOS, but that was a smart use of my time because I was using tools that helped me build it better and faster and that wouldn't be as frustrating, and I was able to plan that out with the experience I now have of using my time wisely. I think you'll get more done if you do it that way versus trying to hit sort of targets like playing Minecraft at least once a day. I don't need to work out like it's a muscle to play Minecraft, like I don't need to be doing maintenance on that stuff. The game is in my head and it will stay there for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and you play a lot more than I do with all the behind-the-scenes stuff that you do for the survival guide and whatnot. Because, I mean, full curtain back, if we did the math, I do 4 streams a week. One of them is currently Lego. This year, I've done my streams back to 2 hours. So between 6 and 7 hours of Minecraft a week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's all I play.
That's me on a strong work day. Like if and genuinely, like that's the amount of time I will put into not just playing Minecraft, but then editing videos and stuff. That's the other side of it, really. But that's more YouTube content creation stuff. But that's the way it goes. Vincent has the question: what area of the game do you think needs to be updated the most urgently? And I think we both came to a fairly similar answer here, which is player inventory. It's the stuff we probably get the most emails about is like suggestions for inventory management and like ways that Mojang can solve the inventory problem. And there's a lot more that needs to be done there. I agree. If not inventory, I think the enchanting and repair mechanics are kind of showing their age, especially in the light of the attempts to rebalance villager trading. So I think maybe that's second on the list, but I can see a lot of people feeling the inventory pinch, and I'm still curious if they have any plans to deal with that long term.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. Was just it's top of mind, I think, a lot of the time, and especially for me playing. It's something that I seem to have the most frustration with.
Yeah.
Zanestral, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Do you think Mojang will remove glitches like going above the nether roof that have gotten so integrated into Minecraft? The short answer for me is no. I don't think they're going to remove it. I think it's been around for too long. The long answer would be you'd be alienating a good chunk of the player base. I think that like doing it, it's not hurting anybody. I know it's not necessarily how the game might be intended to play, but there's also just rules in the honor system. Like if people wanted to play without it, like we do on the Citadel, we don't go above the Nether Roof, but that's just a conversation we've all had and said, like, we're just not going to do it. It means we're going to be more creative with the farms that we build under the Nether Roof as opposed to just doing one way up in the sky above it. And that's how we handle it. I believe you can also have things like setting the height of the world behind the scenes if you wanted to enforce it on an SMP where you didn't think people would necessarily listen, but I don't know how technical that gets.
Yeah, I think you can hard code a dimension height limit, but I'm not sure if you can do that with the Nether. I think the Nether being an existing dimension kind of has its own properties already, but again, don't quote me on that. I'm not really into the tinkering with vanilla Minecraft side of things too much. I also agree. I don't think they would remove stuff like the Nether Roof from Java. Maybe codify it so that it is an intended mechanic after a certain point if they're not going to remove it, or simply extend the height of the Nether so that the cavern is 256 blocks tall, and then you wouldn't have the Nether Roof at that point. But again, you might alienate a player base in a completely different way by doing that, because a lot of the time people are up there for the spawn-proof environment and being able to build efficient farms. So you're sort of you're removing some opportunities for player innovation, unintended though the behaviors are. I think there's a lot of other unintended stuff in Minecraft when you dig down, so it'd be really interesting to see what could go, but the developers just don't want to touch it at this stage. Next up, Grand277 asks, what new colors would you like to add to the game, and what would they be crafted out of? For example, you could have maroon dye from beetroots and indigo from smelting ender pearls. It's an interesting one. I don't know if we've had this kind of question on the show before.
No, I don't know about like new colors, because I think, like, as an artist, I know that so many colors are just different combinations of existing colors. So
yeah,
you'd also have to be able to craft them out of the existing dyes in the game, and that's kind of where my brain went. And that was like crafting pastels by just taking existing colors and adding more white dye to it and getting like a pale pink, a pale yellow, those kind of things, or getting muted darker colors, stuff that you might want to use in like a Halloween build or something spooky by again combining it with black dye. But I feel like it would have to be more of a simple mechanic, because you can't just have 30 new colors of every block in the game, considering we just talked about the inventory issues that we already have. So I was thinking that something along the lines of having it be limited to blocks, like mining a new block like chalk out of the ground. And that is something that you could then dye with the 16 existing colors, but it gives you, similar to terracotta, which has like an orange hue to everything, the chalk would have a pastel hue to everything, or vice versa. Maybe something like dense concrete, or I can't remember what other existing materials in life would work, but you could use that to dye a darker block that would then be a colored version of the darker block that you could use. I would like stairs and slabs though. If we're going down that road and we're wishing, then I don't want just the square blocks. I want to have the stairs and slabs, because I think that would be useful.
Here's the through line. Renewable calcite, some way of turning the calcite into chalk, and then dye the chalk to get pastel colors. I would love pastel colors in this game. I think they'd be fantastic, and another great way of expanding the color palette, like the way adding concrete was for everybody who wished terracotta was primary colors. So exactly. or like saturated, like full colors instead of the sort of orange tinted versions. So yeah, that's a solid suggestion, I think.
Other Side Studios asks, do you guys have a favorite Minecraft mob? I had to think about this for a minute, and my brain was going to all the basic mobs, but actually, allays are really cool. I have not used them very much, but the idea of them and the vibe, I like them. They're very pleasant, and they are whimsical, and they're useful, so they're my top.
I think the unusual ones always do it for me. Like, I've loved Guardians, Pillagers. I think lately it's Sniffers. I think Sniffers fall into the category I was talking about earlier with the animals that have a floppy fringe that you can't really see their eyes. Like totally. Sniffers are that for me in Minecraft. I recognize that people don't think they're that useful, but I think as a mob design, they're really fun. So I like them a lot.
I like their sound design too.
Yeah. As long as you don't have too many of them in one place, and then you're just dealing with constant whining after a certain point. But then that's the same with villagers too, so we'll see. Adam asks, what are your favorite ideas to make the end dimension more engaging for players? That's another very popular suggestion. We get as many emails about an end update as we do about inventory to the show these days, so hopefully we can cover a few of those. Max, Braxton, and Hannah all also asked about our thoughts on an update to the end, and Hannah specifically asked about bioluminescence in the end, which is a fun way to specialize things. What do you think, Joel?
Bioluminescence, I think, while it's kind of low-hanging fruit, because there's been mods that do that, I think it would be great, especially after seeing the end expansion on Minecraft Dungeons and what they did there with that team. I think a bioluminescent end kind of expansion would be fantastic. And I think that if you combine that with really whimsical flying mobs, things that just don't make any sense, jellyfish or whales in the sky, or upside down plants, just all kinds of weird, like the weirder the better, because you really have a blank canvas with the end. And I think that would go a long way. And then also the biomes, but also like height related biomes. So just because you're flying over a specific area doesn't mean that you're going to see the right biome, because you might be flying under something very specific. Like, encourage the use of elytra to find biomes that are higher or lower. And that could be treacherous too, because you're flying down to the very bottom where you could very easily, fly too far down and die. And I think that could be a really interesting way to approach the end.
Yeah, I think the end gets a lot of those kind of jellyfish, whale sort of ideas, because it feels like you're floating in the void to begin with. All of the islands are floating. The chorus plants kind of have that like seaweed or kelp kind of vibe to them, because they grow upwards in such like zigzaggy ways. So I think, that's all really solid suggestions. I think, and this is kind of harder to pin down, but anything that either solves or expands the mysteries of the way Endermen behave could be a really compelling addition to the end. Like, why are they taking all of these blocks? Are they building something with them? Do they live in the end cities? Were they driven out of the end cities? Anything that kind of ties Endermen into the dimension in more than just like they live here because there's a bunch of them. Anything that sort of gives them more personality, I think, would be really interesting. Even something that solves the mystery of why they don't like players looking at them and why they'll attack anything that makes eye contact. I think maybe if there's some sort of clue to that, it broadens the idea of Enderman for players and also gives them more personality to build around in the end. Kind of more compelling reasons to create more architecture of their own, little houses for Enderman or something like that. From a technical perspective, the only other thing I would add is some sort of fast travel option that could link players to distant locations easily, because even with the current state of the end, that makes bases and exploration out there so much more viable. The main reason you don't see players building in the end so much is that it's a pain to get back there every single time. And anytime you want to leave to go and get something in the overworld, you have to warp out to the outer islands and then take whatever other form of transport you have to get to wherever your base is. And it can be very disorienting navigating that dimension, even though you can use maps there. So I think some sort of fast travel thing that works differently to nether portals is probably the ideal.
Yeah, I would agree with that too, because it needs to be condensed, I guess, in terms of longevity, if you wanted to live there for any period of time.
Yeah.
Ironclads, a landscape artist in our community, asks, for each of you, what is your favorite named update, for example, in Minecraft? Update Aquatic, Buzzy Bees, etc.
For me, it's Caves and Cliffs. Like, I genuinely think Caves and Cliffs did the most for the game in a long time. And obviously it was split into two parts, but I'm including both parts in that. I think the terrain in-game now is way more varied and interesting than it used to be, and it still feels new to me. Whenever I encounter a new landscape that I haven't seen before, it's got something remarkable about it that just wasn't there before the Caves and Cliffs update. So that's it for me. How about you?
The Nether update for me, and I think it's because as a player late to the game, I didn't really get the Nether when I first went into it, and I was like, all right, well, it's kind of scary, and it seems very bland, because when you're going for miles and miles and miles of nothing but netherrack, it's like, well, it's not fun to be in there. And the Nether update for me really showed what was possible with Minecraft updates. And I wouldn't be surprised, I don't know this for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Nether update was almost like a test for what they were planning for Caves and Cliffs on a much larger scale, right?
Yeah.
In terms of the biomes and height maps and all the different things. And I love what they did with the Nether. It brought color and change, but very much still remained the same sort of vibe and ominous danger, that kind of thing. Although basalt deltas can be a real pain in the early game. They're not fun. That's not where you want to spawn in. But I do really like the Nether update.
The Nether update was also the first time a composer other than C418 contributed heavily to the soundtrack, which is another really important change in the development that I think goes overlooked. But now we have like additional music discs, we have 2 additional composers alongside Lena Raine who are now working on new contributions. All 3 of them contributed to Tricky Trials soundtracks, so I think that's another huge change for the game. So I think Nether update still has a lot of affection from the community as well. A lot of people hold that up as the example of like what they want updates to be, so it's a tough update to live up to for Mojang, but we'll see. Next up, Black Ninja 77 asks, if you could create any update for Minecraft, what would you make happen in the game? For me, we've talked about this a couple of times on the show in the past, but I'll bring it back. Colored lighting. And obviously that's possible through Minecraft RTX, but having that in the vanilla game without any form of shaders would be incredible. I'll also add fog manipulation to that, whether that's like crafting a smoke machine that isn't just a campfire with smoke rising vertically, like anything that we can use to bring the fog in a little bit for one base, but then change that for when you're traveling a little bit. I think being anything that would allow us to help create atmosphere on a larger scale is really what I would love in the game, because we have control over so many different elements, but the presentation of those elements is very circumstantial. And if you want to take a screenshot where the fog is in tight, you can't guarantee that's the experience everyone's going to have if they walk through that scene, because you have to set your render distance to a lower amount or whatever. So and anything that allows us to create atmosphere, I'm fully on board.
It's funny how similar our answers are, because mine was about putter and paint. I wanted to add decorative bits, sub-blocks that make sense. Things like tables, chairs, basic decor items. So you're not using stairs for chairs in Minecraft, which at this point, 15 years in, feels kind of silly to me. But the other thing was the color, to be able to paint things in Minecraft applied like wax, like being able to change the color of something, which I kind of do with lights and stained glass in Minecraft. I'll like create like a pink stained glass or orange stained glass wall, light it from below, and essentially use kind of like an invisible atmosphere to create a colored effect. So by you having colored light in the game, you'd be able to change the color of a wall by lighting it differently, right?
Yeah.
If you didn't like how like dead the stone was, if you added a warm light, like a red light or a blue light, you can control the temperature, which controls how people feel about things. And I think that's really important. That level of control that's not quite there is definitely something I would look for as far as painting. But yeah, the thing that I find really just I will say obvious to me is the tables and the chairs and the smaller stuff that they want the player to RP, I think, but then you get cut off when you start getting into when you really start to look around, you kind of get hamstrung by the vanilla game anyway.
Yeah, there aren't really any newer blocks that allow you to do much in terms of decoration that you weren't able to do before. So, even if it's not adding, strictly speaking, chairs and tables, there aren't really many things that look more like a table than, a trapdoor on a fence post or something like that at this stage, or a couple of inverted stairs put together. So having more options in that regard would be great, even if they aren't hard-coded tables and chairs.
CJ RV Williams wants to know, what is in your minds one of the more undervalued blocks, in the game, whether it's for building, redstone, general survival, etc., and why? Joel, if you say spruce trap doors,
surely not an undervalued block at this point.
Perhaps overvalued.
Yeah, I was going to say the value of spruce trapdoors is fully on display at this point, and I think that's not just a you thing. That's literally every builder. I think. I know Fwip will also sing the praises of spruce trapdoors. For me, it's conduits. And I think I was digging deep to try and find one that would actually surprise people, because I wanted to say diorite, but then your answer was relatively similar. You also picked a decorative stone type here. And I think diorite is underrated in the sense that I've just used a ton of it as shading for and texture for this giant build where white concrete is the main block. And I think people still try to use it as like a stone type. They're still trying to use it to like build the wall of a house or something, and then they decide they don't like the look of that very much. And you're comparing it to other way more useful blocks in the process of that. And, if worse comes to worst, you can always craft it into andesite because that's still a crafting recipe you have access to. But no, I think conduits are a really cool block. They're a lighting source. They have really unique animations. They are the only thing aside from a beacon that creates that kind of like constant area of effect thing. The water breathing effect having such a large radius allows you to do massive underwater builds if you want to. But I genuinely think players don't think that way about Minecraft because they want to be spending time in the green fields with the blue sky above on the surface. People don't build underwater a whole lot. So I do like using conduits in unexpected ways. I did this in Empires Season 1 with the Vigil, where I created like a kind of a lamp effectively in the center of town, but it was this sort of abstract monument that had a conduit at the center, and they feel like a mystical power source block or some kind of like, weird ethereal light source, even when they're closed up and you're not using the conduit power effect. And I think as this sort of sci-fi-esque floating light source, I think they're a really, really cool block. So I want to use conduits more. The problem is just finding them, since Heart of the Seas can only be gotten out of treasure chests. And so to get a stack of conduits, you have to go and dig up 64 buried treasures, which nobody really has the time for.
Yeah. For me, it was andesite. And it's not undervalued by me, but maybe I think people maybe take it for granted. And I use it all the time, and I don't even really think about how often I use it. I use it to texture stone. I use it to highlight stone. I use it to make things look wet. I use it to make things look polished if you're using the polished versions for cornerstones. I have used it everywhere in West Hill over the last 3.5+ years, and I am always running out of it, which means that I am, not really taking into consideration how often I'm using it. Like if you go to my stone chest, it's overflowing. If you go to my andesite chests, there's 2 stacks, and then I have to go get more. I always forget that I can craft more with diorite and cobble, I think is the recipe. And it's something that, because of the Caves and Cliffs update, you don't seem to get as much of unless you're doing a big dig. Yeah. Right? Unless like a big dig like you did on SOS, because with the new mining levels and people going through deep slate for diamonds and ores, you're just not running into as much andesite as you used to, and just naturally digging through the world. So I find I'm just constantly running out of it, and that's what made me aware of just how much I use it.
Yeah, for sure. All producer The Nookie is back with another question. Is there a way to differentiate between the impatience about progress on a big project and the gut feeling that the project has a flaw or will not work out at all and would be better to stop altogether? How can you tell when it's a case of needing to push through or time to give up and move on?
For me, I think I pay attention to the puzzle and problem solving aspect of a build versus frustration. Frustration for me is like trying to do redstone live on stream when I'm not getting it. I'm not understanding something. Yeah. And there's this weird pressure of feeling kind of dumb in front of people, which is not the case. No one in my community, I don't think would ever really feel that way, but just there's that internal voice in your head. It's like giving a speech in front of people when you're not doing very well. But I think for me, I enjoy puzzle and problem solving creatively. That's one of the reasons I liked design work and I like illustration for clients when I was doing that, is because you solve something visually for someone. There are no rules to say you have to complete something from start to finish in one sitting or in one, scheduled, amount of play. I have had a number of breaks from West Hill on the Citadel where I've bopped out and done a moss farm when they released moss. I did some stuff with calcite and a copper farm just because I wanted a break. I needed to get out of the medieval zone. I needed to work with color. And so I think that having other avenues that you can work on and then refresh and come back is probably a good way to test. Especially if you give yourself a break and then you find yourself excited to go back and return it, then you're not at your end. You're not at the brink of giving up if you just give yourself a break. And a lot of times in my art, the best decision was to stand up, and unless it's due today, stand up and come back to it tomorrow. If it's a personal piece, if you're not having a good time with it, just give yourself a refresh, and fresh eyes in 24 hours will do a lot for anything, especially in Minecraft.
Yeah, and the main thing to remember is that it's not going to look finished until you've placed the final block. So until then, you either keep going or you make peace with it being unfinished. And that's something that, like I said, I feel like I've only completed one project in Minecraft in the last, like, in recent memory, and that is the build on SOS. So until that was finished, I was going to find points at which I could be satisfied with just leaving it. And, you know, you can reach those points throughout a project even if you don't feel like the end vision has been achieved. So try and find what those milestones are, work towards one of those, and then reassess.
Rocks would like to know, what will be the next huge project in scale you will do in your Minecraft worlds, and how do you maintain motivation to complete the project? This was asked in one form or another by 3van, Issy Cabels with regards to big landscapes, Blackjack 7876 with regards to long-term servers and resetting servers often. For me, my next big project is going to be a sci-fi build, and that is both of interest to me and not by accident. It is the complete polar opposite of doing a medieval build for 3+ years. And so I'm excited about it already. I haven't done any planning, but just the idea of using different blocks, different colors, really having a theme, but having a really wide open theme that I can kind of do anything I want in and get away with it is going to be really, really fun. So I'm excited about that. So motivation there comes from a diversion from what I've been doing for the last little while. Not that I haven't really enjoyed what I've been doing for the last little while, but I think that once you start a habit and you invest time in a bigger project, to speak to like long-term servers, like I have no desire to reset the Citadel, especially after putting in years into Westill. Like, I'm really proud of it. I've learned a lot. I've shared that experience with people. And there's no reason for us to reset. The good news is that I'm the admin on the server and I'm doing the server with close friends, so we can reach a consensus very quickly. There's only really about 6 of us to talk to if we have to come and, I will say, vote on something. It's really easy to make that decision. And no one has even ever voiced the idea of resetting. We just say, all right, we'll just travel 10 or 20,000 blocks in one direction. If you want that reset experience, you can absolutely kind of RP that in game if you want. For me, if you're not having a lot of motivation playing Minecraft, this always go back to a talk that I heard from Jake Parker, who's an artist. I haven't spoken with him in a while, but I did have a chance to meet him when I was in Utah a few years ago. And he often will say, you have to refill your creative tanks. Like, it's important to draw and express yourself and do those things as an artist if that's what you want. And to get good, you have to put in the hours, but you will be creatively tapped in anything creative, Minecraft, art, painting, sculpture, if that is all that you do. You have to get outside and meet friends and refill your creative juices, watch movies, read books. And so usually my go-to response for people that are lacking motivation in Minecraft is take a look and see if you're playing too much Minecraft, because that's usually the case, is that you've just exhausted what the game will inspire you to do. And despite it being a decent amount, it's not as much as you think. Minecraft really relies on the external forces from the player to create in the game. The game doesn't really handhold for you. And if you're waiting for it to do, you're going to get frustrated.
Yeah, absolutely. My next big project is going to be in the survival guide world. It will probably take the form of some thematic building somewhere, but I have not decided what yet. In terms of motivation, I think having an audience has really helped me. Like, there are so many people invested in what I've been doing lately, and like my server mates are part of that audience, but also a very encouraging and helpful group of peers. And they've helped me out with like resource gathering and digging this giant hole on Minecraft SOS. And like, if you're in a multiplayer setting, that can be a really strong motivation to push through with projects if people are coming and checking in on your base and going, hey, how's everything going? And helping you with elements of it occasionally, or suggesting things. It can really help you crack that like one thing that you're not quite sure how to fill in the details on. But yeah, I do think having an audience has been huge motivation for me to take on larger and larger projects, just because the spectacle is something that everybody can appreciate when you've got people watching. We're going to really lightning round through these last few because we are almost done and we are very, very long for this episode, but we'll do our best to address them. So Tim S., a landscape artist, member of the Discord, asks, what resource, for example, a book, article, or course, has inspired the biggest improvements in your approach to Minecraft? For me, pretty simple answer, watching my server mates, watching Hermitcraft on a regular basis, and taking notice of how other games approach environment design. I got a lot of inspiration from Elden Ring for Empires Season 2, and I plan on taking inspiration from other games in future designs. How about you, Joel?
I'll be a little bit more specific. It is YouTube for me as well, but I started off with Paul Soares Jr., and that's really what got me hooked into learning more about the game. Quickly moved on to players like Tango Tech, Mumbo, Exumavoid, Iskall85, Gemini Tay, Cubfan135, so Hermitcraft, and then Fwhip, Mythical Sausage, and some guy named Pixel Riffs. So that's all been a lot of my kind of inspiration and also eye-opening ways to play, because if you really look at those players, they all play the game very differently. And I take little bits from all of them and try to make it my own. And it's a lot of fun.
Nice. Yeah. Don't know who that Pixel Riffs guy is, though. He'll probably not amount to anything.
Menger39 asks, hi, Pix and Joel. What do you think makes a good server? Is there a certain type that you like? Personally, maybe PvP, adventure, or survival. I like survival. I tend to be vanilla in that way. But I think the three things that make up a really good server are cooperation, communication, and low expectations and low pressure. I realize I am basically describing the Citadel, but I've had a really good experience on that server. And there's no rivalry. We don't even fake rivalry that much. I think it's just because the people that play on it are all of the same mindset of wanting to have a chill experience with Minecraft. That's not to say that you can't have a blast on a PvP server. If that's your thing, go for it. But for me, I think the cooperation and communication are the biggest ones. And we've heard that from Exumavoid when we had him on the show. He was talking about the greatest strength of Hermitcraft was like how good they are at communicating with one another about what they want to do as a server.
Yeah, I will echo that sentiment. Communication is key. I have been a survival player from the early days of this game and remain so. I've spent a little bit of time on minigame servers, and that's been it. Obviously, having creative worlds is good for planning stuff, but I've never been part of like a creative build project or anything. So yeah, for me, survival, close group of friends, private like whitelisted server, and good communication, whether it's through Discord or through in-game chat. That's the keys to having a comfortable server to play on. Eyesore asks, over the years, which Minecraft mod that you've experienced or seen in action has the most vanilla feel to it, and do you wish was in the game? P.S. Joel is allowed another pick if his first is Zero's Minimaps.
Fine. The map was my top go-to before I read the closing line when I was prepping the email. So Zero's mini map and world map is high on my list. But honestly, some simple ones are really, really solid. Zoomify is what I use on Fabric to mimic the zoom from Optifine. But it works really well, and it kind of works the way that you'd expect the spyglass to work without having to hold the spyglass, which is nice. And then Shulkerbox Tooltip I find very cool. And I like them both because they don't affect gameplay in terms of blocks being placed. It's not like you're playing modded Minecraft. It's just the interface and the UI get like a modernization. And I think that's something that could be very easily folded into vanilla Minecraft.
Yeah. In terms of Vanilla Plus mods that do add content, some of the additions from Quark are spot on. There are some features of that I absolutely adored when I briefly played with it ages ago, so I haven't seen some of the more modern stuff, but there were some that are a bit further out there, like there was a redstone block that activated when you looked directly at it. I think it was crafted with an Eye of Ender or something like that, and that could be very easy to create traps with. But then, yeah, there were some really cool building blocks in there. There was a lot of Japanese-inspired stuff before, like cherry blossom trees were added to vanilla Minecraft. They had them. There was like paper walls and stuff like that, so you could create a very kind of natural Japanese homestead aesthetic. And like I loved the stuff like that. It was really cool and something that there isn't really an equivalent of in-game already unless you're building on a much larger scale. So yeah, I think Quark is probably one I'll recommend to anybody who wants to dip their toes in Vanilla Plus, wants to extend it beyond just data pack additions to the game, but isn't sure where to start. Quark from Violent Moon, I think, is the team that makes Quark now.
Joe Mine Guy writes in to ask and say, to celebrate your 300th episode, the universe has granted your wish for the Minecraft crossover of your choice. Which crossover would you choose? Animated or live action, big screen or small?
So the Minecraft x Elden Ring crossover would be incredible and also cursed. But I think it would be very bizarre seeing stuff like that rendered in like blocky aesthetics. But there's also a very cool pay what you want freeware game that was made. Like there's a kart racer based on characters from Bloodborne. That I'll have to look up what the actual name of it is because they recently had to remove all of the Bloodborne like branding and stuff from it, but it was made in like a PS1 era kind of graphical aesthetic, so it looks like one of the early Resident Evil games, but like a kart racer and all of this weird horror aesthetic to it. So I'm imagining Minecraft and Elden Ring crossing over would be pretty similar.
So for me, the first thing that came to mind was Avatar: The Last Airbender, and they may have done this already.
They've done, yeah. There's been a Bedrock map, I think, that was a crossover, and like skin packs and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I think it's the creatures. It's all the weird, like platypus bear and all that kind of whimsical stuff that happens in Avatar: The Last Airbender, and that to me is something that Minecraft would be very, very good at. But a little bit more thoughtful answer for me would be something like Pixar's Inside Out. Because I imagine that the educational parameters around that would be really interesting to have an adventure inside the minds and emotions of a person from an educational standpoint, like maybe getting young people to talk about mental health more. Just that kind of stuff I think could be interesting. And the visuals of Pixar's Inside Out are just so bright and colorful and line right up with what Minecraft has to offer.
For sure. All those emotions like stored as frog lights in the brain of something. So Tom asks, do you think Mojang will ever develop Minecraft 2.0? And if so, what change would warrant a sequel instead of another 1.0 update? And like at this point, I don't know if people would accept a Minecraft 2.0, considering how much of this game could be modded to look like the new game. You know, like it'd have to be either really visually distinct or include a bunch of stuff that the community wasn't just going to add in and backport to Minecraft at 1 point, whatever it was at that point.
Yeah, I think for me it involves like a format change. I think it would have to be something groundbreaking, a big shift in how we actually consume Minecraft. I'll use VR as an example, even though I know VR Minecraft exists right now.
Yeah,
I don't think it exists very well right now. But if that becomes a thing where it's like accessible to everybody, it's really well done, it's safe, immersive, and provides some sort of new intrinsic value that I can't foresee, I think that might be something. I think it's a platform that has to change, especially if it's a platform where the popularity of it then means that there's no longer this divide between mobile Minecraft, Java Minecraft, and Bedrock Minecraft. Like it would just be Minecraft. It would just be the one. I think that might be where we get the 2.0.
Yeah, if AR technology took off to the extent of like that original Minecraft HoloLens demo, but it was something that you could interact with in sort of a physical sense, something closer to like Minecraft Earth, but something you could manipulate with your hands instead of tapping on a screen, then maybe we're in Minecraft 2.0 territory at that point, because that feels like something you couldn't just do modding it into a desktop client. But
no, exactly.
I mean, who knows? Like they're capable of doing all kinds of stuff.
This is the last question from Wizard of Docs, a landscape artist in our community. How has doing the podcast changed how you think about updates to Minecraft, either for specific features or in general?
I think one of the great things is now having done a few developer interviews, we have so much insight from the devs about the process of coding Minecraft and generating new ideas and coming up with gameplay features. So I think that has done a lot for understanding the creativity that's going into things behind the scenes. Aside from that, now that we do the podcast every week, I have to read the changelogs now. So it's the kind of thing where instead of skipping over the ones that don't add major features, I'm reading all of them. And I'm not understanding half of it, but I feel like it has broadened my knowledge of stuff like commands and data packs. I don't have enough foundational knowledge of either to really apply it to my day-to-day gameplay, but at least I was able to remember that, oh yeah, you can change the timing on a nether portal for the example about ender pearls and teleporting through them earlier. So I think I have a bit more of a finger on the pulse of every aspect of Minecraft now from doing the podcast, where previously I would have stuck to just survival building and a bit of redstone.
I think the podcast has opened my eyes up to things like Minecraft education, about uses for the game in communities, bringing people together, charities, that kind of work, as well as as you mentioned, keeping up to beat on stuff. I think I would have eventually got excited about new things coming to the game, but I don't know if I would have been week to week with it. Like I would have seen the trailers like a lot of other people and just like, oh, cool, there's a new Minecraft update coming. For me, I think the biggest thing is learning kind of what to expect from Mojang, because we get all kinds of emails and ideas and discussions in the community. And I find that I can quite quickly say like, I don't see that happening. Or actually, that doesn't seem like it could be very far off. I'm sure Mojang would put their own spin on it, but when somebody has a really good idea, I mean, talking about the emails that get into the show, those are the ones that get into the show when you're like, you really have thought about this and really feel like it's aligned with the kind of things that we see from Mojang already. I think that it's one of those things where integrating different updates and bringing different ideas and seeing how Minecraft is all like coming together. Like you'll have updates that will have a main theme, but then there's like little things that are added that mean that something like an older mob or an older block or item is then usable again. Spider eyes being fed to armadillos, for example. I'm seeing a lot more, especially in the last 2 years or so, of Minecraft kind of like moving forward, but also like tugging on the tail a little bit and bringing the older parts of the game a little bit up into the current vernacular of what's being done. And it's really cool to see, like, once you start to understand what they're doing, you start to I don't want to say predict it, but like you start to look forward to, I wonder what they might be able to do with this new update that will also make some older things that have been not forgotten about, but maybe not as exciting anymore, a little bit more renewed in the conversation around the community. That's not to say that we can't be surprised, because like boats on leads and ender portal pearls, that I was not expecting that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think what we've learned from this is that it's impossible for us to do lightning round because this has been, I think, a record broken, our longest episode of the podcast. But I mean, what a great time to do it. And thank you so much to everybody who submitted questions for episode 300. We weren't able to get to all of them, but it's been an absolute blast. And I hope you folks have enjoyed this episode, along with the launch of our video format, if you're watching on YouTube or potentially even on Spotify, depending on when we can get that part of the whole thing figured out. That is where we're going to end this episode of The Spawn Chunks. You can find more information about our show and links to some of the stuff that we have talked about over at thespawnchunks.com. That includes the links to all of the stuff we mention in the newsread every week, so you can go and check that out if you don't want to go and dig through Minecraft.net to find it. The music for the show was composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can visit patreon.com/thespawnchunks to join our community, where pledging at any level will get you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live when we record it in Discord every week. We also have our monthly Minecraft audio hangouts, where people can share what they've been up to in Minecraft that month. We currently have 314 patrons, which is down 10 from last week, but this is that time of the month when Patreon might still be processing a few people's pledges. Our last week's Patreon count was 324, so I'm fairly certain a bunch of people haven't just jumped ship right before our 300th episode, but you never know. Either way, there is always room for more, and special thanks should go out to our content engineer patrons, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, Party Voyager, and Yitz. Thank you all for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on Twitter and Instagram, and hopefully soon on TikTok, YouTube Shorts, depending on where we can get these videos out. New episodes are available on Mondays on all of the major podcasting platforms. That does include YouTube now. You can email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is linked on thespawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Johnny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/Pixelriffs, where Minecraft SOS is wrapping up and the Minecraft Survival Guide will be making a triumphant return to its third season. Excited to get into 1.21 stuff when that arrives too. I stream at 3 days a week on Twitch, where you can find me doing behind-the-scenes work for my YouTube series. I'm also playing a bit of Elden Ring on the side right now. I voiced the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. And aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Links to everything that I'm doing online can be found at joelduggan.com. That includes the Citadel Cafe, my other podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. You can also find me on social media at Joel Duggan, very easy to find. Same thing on Twitch. I am continuing the work on the Citadel West Hill build. It will not be finished by the time the Tricky Trials comes out. However, I also have a Lego build that's happening on Fridays. That's the UCS TIE Interceptor, so that's a lot of fun too. Come on by.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite. Question everything.